just give me all the things and make me amazing. And so that's really interesting that you say it's like not that's not gonna work.
Yeah,
um,
there's that other side to it where you just have to make the application. You know, you have to be motivated by the want and need to apply the knowledge that you're getting as a student to your art, not
right,
just because you have it, it's just gonna happen. And I know it
right.
sounds like really like Captain Obvious to say something like that.
Yeah.
Be amazed at how many people want it to just suddenly happen. Like
Oh yeah.
they
I am
graduate.
that person. I am that person. I would be like, Robert, I will be amazing if I can just like absorb some of Robert. And then duh, it doesn't work, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a big time two-way street, you know. That's why
Mhm.
I enjoyed teaching for so long because there
Yeah.
was, if you did ever get, which was unfortunately a little more rare than you would think, when you did get that good back and forth between like yourself and your fellow students, and like they were listening and they were
Mhm.
trying to apply to the thing that they were listening to from me,
Mhm.
and then they would kind of feed it back to me, whether it's through their work, through an essay, through dialogue.
Mm.
Like that
Mhm.
was the magic.
That's so cool. Um, so for everyone who's just kind of catching this, we're having the pleasure of getting to chat with Robert Sullivan today, who is a Maine artist, art professor, um, all so many things. So you're so many things. Feel free to tell me about you.
Different times in my life, I was different things. The one bonus is that it's always evolved around art and creativity. So
Mhm,
my time as a painter, which has kind of been up and down for the past 30 years, has always kind of been maintained by a through line of some kind of creative other career, most of which I've been a professor in undergrad. Uh, for a long time, I was teaching studio art, and then I kind of moved over to being a lecturer in visual culture and visual narratives. Um, but there was a time where I was working for the Hallmark company, and
oh,
like it was actually a subsidiary of Hallmark that was actually here in Maine, where I was doing corporate artwork. Which, by the way, corporate art is kind of an oxymoron because those two
yeah.
terms can't exist in the same world. As I found out, it was
Yes.
like maybe the most steady and lucrative job, I guess, because it was the corporate
Really?
world that I ever had, and it was maybe one of the worst. I really learned a lot about my,
Really?
and
You learned a lot about you?
yes,
Yes.
what it meant to my art to be working in that kind of environment, and how detrimental it was to my artistic health to be doing that, regardless of how
Mhm,
much I was getting paid or how much vacation time or any of
mhm.
that stuff. Didn't mean anything um, versus like the sacrifices that I was making in my own work.
Yeah, very much working for the man.
Work, yeah, definitely working for.
Mhm, mhm. So were you, like, doing cards and stuff?
Yes,
Yeah?
yes, doing custom. This was a company. I'm not going to name the company. They went bankrupt anyway, so I guess it doesn't
Oh,
matter. I'm not going to hurt
okay.
them anymore, but I will.
Yeah.
Actually, they're called William Arthur. They're based
Okay.
just south of here in West Kennebunk, Maine, and they specialized in customized cards for like weddings, invitations,
Mm,
that kind of thing. They had really old school printing presses, like Benjamin
mm,
Franklin era, like etching presses that they would do
wow.
stuff on, like some of the most expensive watercolor paper that you could find with like the real raised ink, like the really traditional printing techniques. So basically, it was for very wealthy people for like their kids' bar mitzvahs and weddings and all that stuff. Um, and uh, then the internet comes along, and you have like just you can make your own cards on screen with no training whatsoever and get it for cheap in multiple iterations. And uh, yeah, it became completely obsolete really quick.
It's amazing, hey, how many industries are just gone?
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
gone.
yeah. That one
Huh.
was a little overconsumptive in the sense that that was like a very elite niche product.
Mhm,
So I wasn't sorry to see that go. Plus,
mhm.
like I was, painting Christmas trees in the middle of July, and it was driving me absolutely bonkers. And it took so much of my energy to do that that I couldn't bring anything back to my own
Mhm.
studio. I was just kind of spent on the corporate work, and when they
Yeah.
started to fail, they started letting people go, and I got a pretty generous severance package. And the first
Mm.
thing that I did was I went back into my studio and just locked myself in there for like 3 months and just painted still life after still life after still life of just things set up in front of me. And I would do them in like a 6 hour to 4 to 6 hour session, a little 6x6. In fact, I've got one right hanging right here on the wall. Let me grab it.
Oh.
There's only like 2 or 3 of these left in my studio. There's a little perfume
Oh,
bottle.
cool.
It's a little
I
shiny.
like it. Aw,
But like this was
I
all
like
these
it.
were all painted from life. I just would put a colored piece of felt behind them, light them
Yeah.
up with a 3/4 lighting, and just paint them. And I did that for 3 months. Hold on, let me hang
Yeah.
this here so it doesn't fall down. And um, I was just about done, and somebody came over for a little studio visit. It was actually one of the people who did framing for me, and he opened a new shop that he wanted to turn into a gallery. And he was like, "Whoa, look at all this! You want to have a show?" And I was like, "Cool." And we did that, and I sold most of them. And so
Wow.
I was just kind of like, "This is what I should be doing."
Yeah, no kidding.
This corporate stuff, but there's always that pressure in life. As a husband and father of three, like
Mhm.
you feel this need to fulfill those obligations of real life,
Absolutely.
as as
Yeah.
a parent yourself. And so you get drawn towards these things saying like, oh, this feels like the right thing to do, the responsible thing to do. And then
Yeah.
you do it and you're just like, is it responsible to kill myself and to like bury my dreams and compromise my art and myself for the sake of this responsibility thing? And the
Absolutely.
answer is always no. Um, it took me years to find that out. I mean, I'm 56
Mhm.
years old, which sounds old, but
Not really. Like now that I'm 41, it's like, nah, it's not.
it goes really fast. But
Mhm.
you know, I'm no, as a professor, like I'm also no stranger to being on the other side and being the student. And like
Mhm.
life is the school, and like I'm being schooled all the time. And I'm willing to learn, and
Yeah.
it's not these like negative things either. I mean,
No.
through that, I learn about my own work, what
Mhm.
it is that I do best. Like just that corporate gig itself, just going back to that for a second. Like
Yeah.
I learned what I didn't want to do.
Mm. Mhm.
It's kind of a weird lesson. And it was a little bit of like a, quasi biblical level temptation thing where it was just like, here's all the money and like the
Mhm.
safety and the security, which also wasn't true anyway, because the company went under.
It
So
went under, right? Yeah. It's
so
so interesting,
none
hey?
of that
Like,
stuff is really real. And if you stick with what you really want to do, and you have to be super real about it though. And I don't
mhm.
just the pragmatic thing where it's just like, oh, you need to make money. It's like, no, the actual sticking to it is like you have to believe that this is the thing that you want to do. And it takes more
Mhm.
effort and self-motivation than you could possibly think in order
Mhm.
to make that really, really happen.
Well,
I
that belief, that
and
bel
belief
yeah, that
and
belief is so hard to keep having in yourself.
for sure. And there are so
Mhm.
many things that happen in life that knock you off that belief, that
Mhm.
you just go, well, yeah, I'm just being delusional here. I shouldn't be
Mhm.
thinking that way. Um,
Yeah.
but you can't do that, and you shouldn't do that. And some people might look at you and call you selfish and just self-absorbed. It's just like you want to do this thing that like makes no money and serves no practical purpose in the world. Um, and you go, oh yeah, you're probably right. Damn it. But it's not true. You can't listen to those
Mhm.
voices, even if it's in your own head. You can't listen
Yeah.
to that one either. You have to like be positive and maintain it. Honestly, I bring up my age and everything now because like
Mhm.
only now am I really, really realizing this for truth, like the truth of that.
Right.
And it's taken a long time. It's taking a lot of
Yeah.
different types of gigs in order for me to sort of come to that. But I think that's the thing I could put out there for anybody listening, is that the path is not linear. So you can listen to
Yeah.
me and just be like, oh, that's what I should be doing. It's like, don't do what I did. I don't even know what I did. It's like,
Well,
so
it's like that doesn't even exist anymore, like the
some of
corporate
that
gig you're
stuff.
talking
No,
about, right? Yeah.
no,
So it's
you can't even do it.
no, you can't. You can't if you wanted to,
Right.
right?
Um,
Yeah.
but the point is just the non-linear path of an
Mhm.
artist is the path.
Right.
You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to focus on this one thing and I'm just going to get there because I can see it straight ahead. It's like, no, you're going to go all the way around and go off the trail and, like, do the two paths diverged in a wood. This is like 10 diverged to, like, on a clover leaf on a super highway. Like, you're just gonna go off. And then, but then you come back. The whole point is just keep coming back, find your way
Yeah.
back, and then go forward a little more. You might get thrown off, you come back, and, like, eventually you end up old like me, but you come to kind of a bigger truth in what it is that you do.
Yeah. And so just for everybody who's listening, I know you've already told us your age, but like how long have you been a painter? Like, I mean, I'm sure you painted before you got into academia,
Mhm.
right? And then so to be a professor, you probably have your master's, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's got to be a chunk of learning,
Mm,
right?
a bit, yeah.
hmm But like
And
as a professional artist, like how long have you been that person?
I mean, so professional meaning that, like, I got paid for a gig.
Yes.
Most of us who are artists, like, oh, I've been drawing and painting since I was, like, before I could, smaller than the teddy bear that I owned or whatever. But
Yeah, probably your whole life.
yeah, it's a whole
Mhm.
life kind of thing. But I think, coming out of undergrad, or just coming out of undergrad, because I went to school at the School of Visual Arts in New York City, um, and I double majored in illustration and painting. The illustration side being, again, that thing where, I mean,
Mhm.
I
Gotta
came
make
from
the money.
a really conservative family that did not want me to be doing any of this. So I had to kind of pave my own way, but I had to make some concessions. So I didn't go
Mhm.
full on into the painting thing. I took the illustration route to try and get, professional gigs that would pay me immediately for the work. So
Mhm.
that's what I did coming out of school, like right out of the gate. So that was
Wow.
like 1992.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so it's been like 32 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean that is such an accomplishment. Having just my short time being involved in art as a commercial enterprise. That's
Mhm.
a hard thing to sustain,
Mm,
right?
it is, and that's going back to, like, the going off the beaten path and doing all these other things,
Mhm.
but always having that core of, like, art is the thing that I do, no
Mhm.
matter what it is.
Mhm.
And coming to the idea of, like, being a painter and not an illustrator, which, by the way, whenever my students ask me the difference between, like, what is fine art and what is illustrating,
Mhm.
fine art is also, it's kind of a lame term when you really think about it, but, like,
Mhm.
that's just the term we have.
Mhm.
Easy reference point. So the difference that I tell them, because,
Mhm.
people tell you all kinds of things. People in the fine art world will say one thing, people in the illustration world will say a different thing.
Mhm.
And both sort of look at each other with a little bit of disdain, sort of across.
Yeah, they're kind of like
Yeah, what you do is lame, and it's like, what you do is selling out, and it's just like,
yeah.
shut up. You're both
Yeah.
making pictures, and you're supposed to be really happy with whatever that is.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but the true definition is, like, illustration is making art for other people's ideas in mind.
Mhm.
Making fine art is making art with your ideas in mind. That's it.
I like that definition because I've heard a lot of different definitions, and so I think one of the most recent ones I heard was like, well, illustration is narrative and fine art is symbolic or emotive, and I was like, well, kind of, but not really. Like, not really. I
No.
mean, I I've seen tons of fine art that's narrative.
Yeah. There's I mean, antiquity, like, during that period of, like, the neoclassical, uh,
Yes.
like, all of that stuff was narrative and allegorical.
Exactly.
You don't see that as much now, especially in like the high end fine art world, because that's, that's almost kitsch now, those types of
Yeah.
concepts. But, and so people, if you put that into your work as a fine artist, like they'll say the critique would be, oh, that's too illustrative. Like
Mm.
that's an insult, you know,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I'm
We
always
don't like
like,
that.
why are we using that word in a pejorative sense? Because I
Yeah.
wear both hats, and I don't, and I really feel the distinction isn't really inside the work so much as it is the external forces
Hmm.
that guide the work.
Yeah.
And one, I
Exactly.
suppose, is external and internal if it's you
Mm.
guiding the path of the work. And then one is
Hmm.
purely external because it's a creative director and it's a product or an advertisement or, you know,
Hmm.
creating a text like a children's book or something like that, something external. But that's
Hmm.
the only distinction. I mean,
Hmm.
if you were to really be empirical about it, Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, the ceiling and the altarpiece,
Yeah.
those are
That's
illustrations.
straight edition.
Those are
Hmm.
illustrations for like Bible stories.
Hmm.
The Pope commissioned them, and they're
Hmm.
just he's like, the Bible stories, dude, right? You're a good Catholic. So
Oh.
put them up there so people can see them because most people don't know the High Latin Mass. They can't understand it. Or they can't read the text because they're all stupid. So we need more
Hmm.
people. So let's get the stupid people, and they can look at the pictures like it's a big comic book.
Yeah.
And it was like a really successful marriage between painters and the Catholic Church, and that spawned
Hmm.
like a whole Renaissance and everything that we have now. Um,
Hmm.
so, and also I know a lot of this through my art history, but also the fact that I was raised Catholic, so all that imagery was around me all the time.
Yeah.
And it's really funny too because I am going off on a tangent here, but there
That's
was a
okay.
kind of a dovetailing between the Catholica visual culture and comic books because I was also surrounded by
Mm.
comic books all the time because my grandfather
Mm.
was the editor for Action Comics #1, which was the first edition of
What?
Superman. Yeah,
No.
yeah,
That's so
and
cool.
no, so it was I was surrounded by comic stuff all the time. By the way, like I'm not any kind of Nepo baby because he left what
Mm.
eventually became DC. Um, and started his own magazine enterprises comic publishing company, and it just failed
Just
miserably.
failed. Oh.
And because he thought he could compete against Marvel and DC, just like
Oh.
so not a good businessman. Probably inherited that. Uh, that's
No.
the only thing I inherited. I did not see a copy of Action Comics #1 in my lifetime because if I had, we might not be talking right now because
Right?
that's worth $15 million.
Yeah.
So,
That's
but
a
it was
cool thing though.
it's kind of an
Be
interesting
involved in.
history. I mean, not in terms of the fame aspect of it, just in terms of my exposure to these different things.
Absolutely.
You-
Yeah.
If you look at like the icons of like, the Christ risen with like the hearts and like the blue and red rays coming out of it, and
Hmm.
the Immaculate Heart of Mary image with the same kind of heart thing. This is like a logo on a superhero costume right here. So
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
swap them out, you know?
Hmm.
It was
Yeah.
just
I never
so
thought of
weird
it that way. Yeah.
looking back on it and saying like, that's the kind of thing I was exposed to, and how confused I
Hmm.
was as a young person by it, but also just kind of wrapped up in the sort of mythological narrativity of things
Hmm.
like Bible stories. And sorry if I'm offending people by calling it mythological, but I've read it a million times, so I know. And
Hmm.
and also the mythology and storytelling inside comics, like
Hmm.
it's just
Very similar.
those
Hmm.
narratives like also kind of cross over in a lot of ways, like super powered beings that can control like an environment full of lesser beings,
Mm.
either save them or crush them depending on whether they're the villain or the good guy. And like,
Yeah.
and I think narratively to a degree, but certainly visually, that like really got into my head.
Very similar. And it's interesting that you bring that up because they have a very similar quality, even in composition, where
Mhm.
that superhero figure kind of takes that center stage, and then there's kind of other beings or other elements around it, but very similar
Yeah, yeah.
compositions too. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting juxtaposition.
It definitely is, and it's not something that I was like fully cognizant of as a kid.
No.
I
Well,
think
I don't think we're fully cognizant as children at all.
but I do think that it was those both of those things were absorbed simultaneously, and whatever
Mhm.
kind of personal makeup I had kind of got all enmeshed into other ideas inside my head as to like,
Mm,
when I draw or make things, like how do those things look going out into the world? And it took, decades and decades before I realized like where all that stuff was coming from and why
mhm,
there were other types of art that I was attracted to.
mm,
And that it could kind of be traced back to those early years and those visuals that I was exposed to as well.
mhm.
And I was also fortunate because I had a grandmother on my mother's side, um, that and they lived in New England, and that was my attraction to New England. That's why I'm here in Maine, moving from New York.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
okay.
she was lived in Old Lyme, Connecticut, which is the birthplace of the American Impressionists. Um,
Oh.
there's a
Hmm.
museum there called the Florence Griswold Museum, and she, as like a wealthy widower, actually housed Child Hassam and the rest of the American Impressionists when they came over from France after having visited there, looking at all the impressionists and being like, "Oh, this is the way to do things," and come back to the
Huh.
states, and nobody knew what the hell they were doing. They were looking at their paintings like, "This is crap. What are you guys doing?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "Wow, we're so poor now." And so she housed most of them, and
Wow.
they all hung around her estate. And if you go to her house, you'll see like the dining room, like the wall panels are all painted with pastoral scenes, local pastoral scenes by the American Impressionists that stayed
What?
there.
That's so
And
cool.
so she introduced me to all that stuff. So and also Andrew Wyeth and the Wyeth family, because that's a very New England thing. Uh,
Yes.
it
I
stands
love
for
his
Pennsylvania,
work.
but it's also Maine. But she also introduced me to that. So I also had that coming in from another side. Um,
Wow.
because that was actually, I guess, both sets of grandparents had their fingers in like weird
Yeah.
ritual culture pies that, like, for me as a little kid, since I guess I was like really impressionable and precocious, like I just absorbed them in all these like weird ways. I was attracted to all of them and didn't really
Mhm.
know if and how they related at all. But somehow, as my work got better and my skill set got better and I got formal training, that those predilections of like those likes kind of
Mhm.
came out in the work and started to form.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. You have two grandparents that were, I mean, those are very extremes of the art world, but still like housing vagrant plein air artists,
Yeah, I know.
impressionists. That's like she must have been a pretty cool grandma.
Yeah. Oh, that wasn't, I mean, it wasn't my grandma. It was like
Oh, okay.
this wealthy woman, like, because that was like 18
Yeah, I was thinking
or
that's a while ago.
early 1900s, I think that happened.
Okay.
The reason my grandmother was all into it is because she was part of like a local like ladies society that
Okay.
like were caretakers of that estate, because it wasn't a formal museum at the time when I was a little kid. They
Okay.
were kind of keeping it alive as this like society of the Florence Griswold whatever. My grandmother was a
Okay.
huge gardener, so she took care of a lot of the gardens. So she
Hmm.
was always taking me over there. So I was
Nice.
like hanging out like in this mansion looking at these paintings, probably kind of bored, but at the same time still like, this is
Hmm.
pretty interesting because I don't know any other kid that does this. So
Right? Yeah. That
but
must have been, I don't know, it sounds like the perfect storm for a little artist to kind of incubate in.
I think so. I think that
Mhm.
it was a motivating factor from a bunch of different angles, because it sort of taught me, again, not formally but informally, that you could be, if you wanted to be an artist, you could be any kind. you know
Mhm.
any of these things were relevant, whether you wanted your art to reflect something very formal like a religious thing, if you wanted to be very commercial and be comic oriented, or
Mhm.
if you wanted it to be uh you know culturally relevant in a moment like the American Impressionists,
Mhm.
you could try and be that too. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's really crazy. Like, I try and tell people sometimes, um, 'cause I was talking to somebody recently, I can't remember where it was, but they were asking why why I send so much of my work to the States. And I was like, well, because Canada isn't the same. Like
Mm.
Americans have more like cultural institutions surrounded like centered around art and centered around this culture. And like even the history you're mentioning, um, there's just there's just more of that in the States. And oh, it was a CBC reporter. I was chatting with. We just like found one another. We're just like hanging out and chatting, and she's traveled the world, and um, she's like, well, why Canada isn't into that? Well, it's just we're very utilitarian. We're a
Mm.
very young nation, too, in the sense of population. So
Right.
you don't have that same like culture base that that States has, and especially like that interest in figurative work is a very small portion of any population,
Yeah.
but Canadians tend to just be more utilitarian.
Hmm.
Even if you look at our architecture, it's very hideous. Um, it's very utilitarian. It just is, and it's just a different culture. And so I've always wanted to go down to the States and see some of these museums. But I have only ever seen them from afar. So it's really interesting. I feel like I almost need a map to like map out all these places. And one of them is like the Wife Museum. I'd
Yeah.
love to go see.
Yeah. The one in Chadds Ford and the one in Rockland, Maine, at the Farm
Mhm,
Museum. Um, uh, Funny thing. I want to get back to what you were saying there, but just because you
mhm.
mentioned that, um, I moved to Maine almost solely on the basis of being like such a diehard Wyeth fanboy that,
That's so crazy. That's such a crazy thing to just like upend your life and be like, I need to move
yeah, my daughter was
here.
1 month old when I did this too.
Oh wow.
My wife was, with like a big Greek family in New York. Like they were all like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
I was not popular with anybody
I
in that
know.
period, but it turned out okay. Like I actually bought my first house, and I apologize to any millennials or younger generations that are hearing this, but like I bought my first house for like almost nothing, like a huge Victorian farmhouse on the same street where they were at that very time building the Wyeth Center. Um, I met Jamie Wyeth. I'd see him in town. He could never remember my name. He'd be like, "Oh, you're that young illustrator fella that just moved to town." That was his name for me. Um, and I never met the old man, which is what he called Andy, his dad. But
Uh-huh.
he was around. There was Wyeth stuff like everywhere, and it really inspired me to sort of make this change in my life. And I actually moved away from being a commercial illustrator because I had an agent in New York City, so I could kind of go anywhere. Uh, and I was doing that from Maine for a while, and then being where I was and like my motivations changing that way, I moved away from it and tried to get into more of like the fine art thing because that
Mhm.
was something that was happening in the area. But what
Yeah.
I didn't realize, again, like a big learning curve, is that it was
Mhm.
very seasonal. And
Mm.
it's like you do your research, Rob. What I didn't know is most of those artists weren't from there. They were from away, and the
Oh.
galleries were just like bringing the stuff there
Uh,
because all the wealthy tourists that were in the area would come there. So
oh,
they
that
just
makes
went to
sense.
town and see the galleries and see art that they kind of knew already and would just buy it there to decorate
Mhm.
summer homes. Like,
Mhm.
John Travolta and Kirstie Alley had houses on Islesboro, which was really close by. And, it's just, I could name tons of celebrities that lived in the area, which is weird because I come from, New York and Long Island, and I lived out on the East End in like the Hamptons area where there's tons of celebrities too. So it's like
Mhm.
really hard to get away from that strange separation of like art and like this
And
super
wealth.
upper
Mhm.
wealthy class that would
Yeah.
buy it. And so that's a whole other discussion. But getting back to what you said, just the museum thing kind of made me think about that.
Mhm.
But in terms of cultural institutions here, and yeah, I definitely recognize the distinction. I mean, the only real
Mhm.
Canadian like influence that I've ever heard of for either friends of mine or myself is like the Group of Seven, which
Yes.
out of like the
Which was forever ago. Like,
forever ago. It was
yeah.
maritime, so it was like one just small section of Canada.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but as far as here is concerned, you also have to recognize the fact that it's still very localized into like these cultures.
Absolutely.
There's
Hmm.
tons of it in New England because this is the place where the country started. So the
Yes.
historical component is kind of embedded into it too. I mean,
Hmm.
I could take you to a bunch of places around here where there were at one time artist colonies right here on the coast of Maine.
Yeah.
A bunch of them, like Perkins Cove and
Hmm.
Ogunquit, and like all that. Like, there's a lot of it. Um,
Hmm.
and there's still vestiges of that in the work of people like working now. Like, I
Yeah.
see some people's work in certain galleries in certain places, and I'm like, oh, they're the student of so and so who was a student of so and so who was part of like the Perkins Cove group back in the mid
Right.
1800s. I mean, like, it's
Hmm.
all very closely interlinked. And then you go to the cities, so the
Hmm.
big population centers, because that's where all the artists, even if they were from rural places, like the only place that, it's like anything, they'd have to go to the cities to sell their work and get like
Hmm.
the Knickerbockers and Rockefellers and all like the blue-blooded,
Yeah. Exactly.
to buy
The
their work.
Epsteins of
Well,
the world,
right. And they're
unfortunately.
trying to erase those names off of
Yes.
things like the Snacklers and people like that. But
Hmm.
um, you know, America wouldn't have its national park system were it not for the Hudson River School painters, because
Mm.
they're the ones who made the trips to, like, Frederick Church went to Acadia National Park. Albert
Mm.
Bierstadt went out to what is now Yosemite,
Hmm.
painted in those places. And it was
Hmm.
wild. I mean, they had to camp, they had to
Yeah.
fight off like native tribes that wanted them out of there.
Wow.
Um, and then they brought back all their sketches and stuff to their New York area studios, painted these massive things. And then, Nelson Rockefeller was just like, where the hell is that? And Frederick Church was just like, oh, if you go up the coast of Maine, there's a big island with mountains on it. And he's just like, I'm going to buy all of it and I'm going to give it to the nation.
Wow.
That was the way. And so we wouldn't have Acadia National Park were it not for artists. So
Hmm.
there's like a cool tradition
Hmm.
of that. Like, that's the one that I'm more respectful of, just because there was a back and forth between, like, what this, I mean, there's bad side of nation building and good side, and I think that art and
Hmm.
land preservation is a good side, and I think
Absolutely.
that's something that was like really fortuitous.
Hmm.
Um and another, that's another way that you could sort of ply your trade as an artist. You could be,
Hmm.
you know uh, environmentally conscious and like paint
Absolutely.
or design things to be that way. So
Hmm.
there's
To
all these,
influence people.
yeah, there's all these
Yeah.
different pathways out there, and there's historical facts that can sort of like,
Hmm.
that can be your belief system because
Hmm.
it's happened before, and you can kind of like hook your wagon to that train and sort of carry that path along into the contemporary.
Yeah. I don't know if I was more jealous of your Victorian farmhouse or the fact that you got to like meet like or be around a living like the living Andy wife. That's really cool. Um, but when you talk about that, it reminded me of the group of seven. They were very much the same. They helped with that land preservation. I think
Mhm.
that um I can't remember if it was Algonquin National Park or which one it was, but because of the group of seven, a lot of Canadian national parks exist today. So
There you go.
mostly on the eastern coast, of course, because BC and Alberta are very like the new world, right? Like we
Hmm.
haven't been established as long as the East Coast. And it's interesting when you drive because I grew up in Vancouver, and when you drive back east, um, you can see like the ancientness beginning, right? So it is kind of interesting, but like if you ask the average Canadian who a group of seven is, they don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's not even taught in schools, which is really sad.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. I mean, I guess to any Canadians that might be watching, it's I suppose it would make you happy to know that, like, at least in the Northeast, most artists know who the Group of Seven are. Um,
Oh, well, yay.
I mean, I have a very close friend of mine, a colleague of mine, who we went to the same grad school program,
Hmm.
who's not too far from here, about 10 miles from here, successful painter. Um, his work, is influenced by them. Other artists
Hmm.
too of the same milieu, but he every time he's asked, he definitely brings them up. So,
Yeah.
um, and
And
I
I
think
mean,
it's one of those things that I think that way of thinking, the Hudson River School artists, even the American Impressionists, the Group of Seven, kind of transcends borders a little bit because it's all about the land and landscape and the
hmm
beauty of that. And
hmm
so, in some, I think it's the institutions that instrumentalize it towards a more political angle, like let's
hmm
preserve this land, uh,
yeah.
and preserve Canadian land, preserve American land, preserve
Hmm.
Eastern, that kind of thing.
hmm
Um, but the artists themselves are not motivated
They
by
don't care.
no.
No, it's like I think the biggest thing that I got out of looking at the Group of Seven work was the sense of movement, the sense of like that impressionism, that
Mhm,
feeling, right? And too with you see that same thread throughout Van Gogh's work and just all the impressionists. It was like that sense of the moment, that sense of feeling. And there haven't been too many art movements after that period of time
mm,
that have kind of captured the innocence and that sense of wonder, because people still refer to like I was in Michael's the other day and I saw these this fabric that had like Monet's work printed on it.
mhm,
And I was thinking, from what I've been exposed to when it comes to what his personality was like, I'm like, I bet you he would be rolling in his grave if he knew how his work was being monetized by complete strangers,
yeah,
Not it's not going to his estate, it's not going, same with Van Gogh. I often think that some of the impressionists like Van Gogh who died very young or whatever, it feels almost like the museums were a little bit predatory with their work and used it as merch because there's no estate behind it,
mhm.
because there's no, right? I mean, now it's old and, you know, it's kind of open territory, but
Yeah, it's more protected now, but that's a good word that you use, predatory. That sort of um, institutional hunger to capitalize on
mhm,
creative people's work is still going, unfortunately, strong today. Whether you're a designer or an artist or whatever, I mean, Jean-Michel Basquiat's story reflects that. Uh, you know, there's just like countless others that come to mind, and I don't want to go off on like that
mhm,
as a history lesson, but like that's a thread that kind of runs through everything too. And I suppose,
mhm,
like, well, gonna try and come full circle here, like in terms of like what's motivational to you as an artist and what can knock you off that motivational path is stuff like that.
mhm,
When you hear that kind of thing, it's just like, oh, like what is even the point? Because someone's just going to take my
right,
stuff, or uh, you know, it's going to get stolen and it's going to get
mhm,
monetized in a way that I don't want, or
mhm.
whatever,
It's gonna get fed through an AI engine,
or that, right?
right?
Or
Yeah.
AI's going to scrape it off my website, and then I'm going to
Mhm.
someone's going to look for my work, and a bunch of AI images are going to pop up that are trying to pretend to be my work. Um,
Yeah.
and that's difficult for any artist, but I think that's still, regardless of how noisy it is still just noise. And
Mhm.
as long as you're remaining steadfast in your motivations and you're applying your skill in an honest and sincere way, I think, you're always going to come out on top. But like you said before, like you have to believe it. You have to believe it in it yourself. Not a
Mhm.
matter of like convincing yourself like, one half of you is a car salesman and the other half is the one trying to buy it. Um, like it has to be both sides of your brain need to
Yeah.
be thinking the same thing. Like this is what I should be
Mhm.
doing, and regardless of all this other stuff, because I
Mhm.
kind of have to do it. It's not
Mm.
a matter of doing it for money, doing it for recognition. It's doing it because I want to do it. It's really easy, at least for me. And we were talking about like my growing up amongst these artsy kinds of things, uh,
Mhm.
and being motivated as a kid. You just want to do it because it's like right in front of you, and you're so fresh faced on the world. You're just kind of like mirroring it back in your own kid like way, or the best way that
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah.
But, Picasso did say that, it's every child is an artist. It just, it takes a lot of effort to stay being an artist once you grow up, because
Mhm.
just end up being plagued with like responsibilities, self-doubt, external motivations that are incorrect, external pressures that are just squashing the dream. Um,
Mhm.
and Yeah, you just got to think back to like try and remind yourself of like what you thought when you were a kid, when you want
Mhm.
to make something. Like, didn't
Yeah.
matter how good it was. It was just like,
No.
want to make the thing. Can you tap back into that? And I think
Uh,
that's the thing that'll keep you going.
Absolutely. And that's the thing that I come back to all the time. I also just want to say hi to Liz, who's in Australia. So hi, Liz. We're gonna be chatting with Liz in a little while too, so that'd be
Okay.
cool. But yeah, I often think about that. I often kind of think about, well, what would 5-year-old me want me to do? And it's interesting how it has become a stronger motivation the longer that I hit these walls. And I think a lot of people do, like they talk about art block. People talk about it endlessly. And honestly, I think it's like you say, it's mostly that voice that's saying this is useless and you have this gas bill to pay.
Hmm.
You know, how are
Right.
you going to do that? And when you're wasting your time with this hobby, you
Hmm.
know, instead of it being like, well, I need to make this. This is about human expression. This is about, my life is so finite and I need to make this. I think that and like giving yourself permission to do that is so hard.
Yeah.
Uh, as I have been working in this pottery studio and watching people come through the studio, um, and people will come in and they'll say, well, I have to paint this cup and not something I want to do because this is useful.
Uh-huh.
And there's a part of me that just wants to be like, actually,
Yeah.
you can pay whatever you want, that's like free will, man, and you deserve joy,
Right.
and just like, how do you rewrite those internal scripts so that you can make that thing that is the Mona Lisa, like there were great painters and they were doing their commercial work, but at the same time, they never gave up on the things that gave them life because they recognized how important it is to keep that thread of self satisfied.
Absolutely. It makes me think of like people like John Singer Sargent, like one of the greatest portrait painters that this country's ever had. Um,
Hmm.
and well, he was working in Paris and London. He didn't really work here, but he was an
Hmm.
expat that just kind of went everywhere. Oh,
Hmm.
he did come to Maine quite a few times. Um,
Okay.
he sought out a watercolor artist named Samuel Peter Rolt Triscott out on Monhegan Island, maybe one of the first like true Monhegan Island artists like that to go out there and to just sequester himself and paint. Such an amazing
Mm.
watercolorist that Sargent came across the Atlantic to go visit him and just
Wow.
like, what are you doing? And, and and painted around here for a while. But Sargent, that was his thing though. Like he painted these monumental portraits of like super important people, wealthy, powerful, like you name it,
Hmm.
beautiful. Um, And yet on his vacation, he'd go figure out how to paint better, not for the commercial part, because like he just wanted to. Like the
Hmm.
guy was just relentless in his pursuit of just making his art better. And
Hmm.
who knows what that where that bar was, because it was only him that said it. So
Yeah.
I think, if you can motivate yourself, self-motivate in that
Hmm.
direction,
Yeah.
then you've got it all set. Like you don't have to think about anything else.
Hmm.
There's a contemporary figure painter named Vincent Desiderio, who I'm a pretty big fan of, and I met him my first year of grad school. Actually, he just so happened to be the speaker. I was like super lucky because I already like was a big fan at that point. Um,
Hmm.
and in one of his talks, he pissed the audience off, especially the faculty off, like a lot when somebody asked
Awesome.
him like, your pictures are like really narratively complex and you're telling us what's going on, but
Hmm.
that requires a certain level of knowledge that a typical audience doesn't have, and has to like decode the work to a certain
Right.
degree. And
Hmm.
he just kind of looks at it and he's just like, oh, well, that doesn't matter because the audience is dead to me. And then you just hear this,
Um,
oh, oh my God. One professor I had, he literally like stood up and was like, I thought he was going to go for him. So we were very critical theory oriented in that program. So there was a lot of like, everything was political and like certain statements shouldn't be made and like that kind of thing. It
oh,
was
okay.
all like very, very contemporary in its thinking. So statements like that were just like shocking. And it's also like,
Yeah.
it's so shocking that you have to sort of take a step back and it's like, what does he really mean by it?
Mm,
He doesn't want the audience to be dead. He doesn't want to show his work to a bunch of dead people. That doesn't make any sense.
no.
No, he's just trying to do his own thing without thinking, are other people going to understand this, or do I need to modify it in order to make
Mm,
it more understood? And
right.
that gets in the way of you making the work that you want to make.
Hmm.
So the audience isn't really dead to you. You just shouldn't be trying to
Hmm.
please everybody.
And do
Which
you think like that piece is so missing from contemporary work because now we have these 24-hour stories where we got to share the process and we've got to, social media and we got a time lapse and that constant feedback, like you can't just lock yourself in your studio anymore for months and
Yeah,
just work.
I mean, well, you should if that's what you want to do. That's
Right.
basically it. Like if that's not you, if you do like immediate work that you want to present to the world and like make speed paintings with ketchup and you're into that, like do it. But like if you're doing it because that's going to sort of click something in the algorithm to your benefit, then you
Mm,
should not be doing that. Like that's not you.
yeah.
That's not you. I mean, it's not me. My paintings take friggin' forever. They take too long. But when I tried to streamline my process, and I thought about using different materials, like not oil paint, stuff that would dry more quickly, that was more immediate, that I could just like go back and forth with it like real quick, instead of like when I make a layer of painting in oils, like you have to wait for it to set up. You can't attack it for a certain amount of time, or I have to sit here for like 10 hours straight while the painting's still open, and like just paint as much as I can until I'm exhausted. I thought, there's got to be a better way to do this, right? And so I tried other things, and the end result was okay, but I was never really convinced by it. You know,
Right.
when other people were just like, "Oh, this is a great new direction you're going in," and like now you can make you know so many more paintings because it's like you can do it in like 5 days instead of a month. But
Right.
I looked at it and I was just like, I mean, this is okay, but it's like I felt like they were very incomplete statements. Um,
Mm.
and so, I'm back to doing my thing, just logging away at these forever oil paintings. I mean, they don't. Some take longer than others, but like now I'm starting to understand that it's like the painting requires what it requires, and like I should
Mhm.
be like looking at my watch. It's like, oh, I gotta. It's not a cake, like
Yeah.
it's not
It's not a
a timing
recipe.
thing behind it.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's tricky, right? Like, especially when you're you're meeting deadlines and you've got, you know, maybe another job that you're working too.
Hmm.
And balancing those two things can be very hard.
It is, and I did it for years.
Hmm.
And in one case, I was working as a professor, going to grad school that required like 30 hours of research and 25 hours of painting a week. At least that's what they said was the average.
Right.
And I had like 3 kids at home. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
my wife was, a big help in all of it, but like,
Hmm.
I didn't want to be a disappearing dad either,
Yeah.
because I mean, I like being a dad, so I didn't want to miss any of that. So I look back on that time and I was just like, how the hell did I do that? Um, I
Lots of coffee.
somehow was able to just time manage around like what was important. It was like camping. You just take as few things as possible, otherwise it's just going to wear you down. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, once I was done with grad school, then I was just like, oh, now I can like live like a normal person. But I was pretty efficient in that period of time. Plus,
Hmm.
there was also a period that only ended a little while ago where I was like really athletic, like a cyclist and a runner,
Oh,
and so I
wow.
had to leave time for those pursuits as well. So just
Yeah.
being able to just like divide myself across all of these things,
Mm.
and not only just have energy for my artwork and the education side, the academic side of things, but just the time.
Mhm.
Like it was such a stretch. And now I'm really lucky because I've worked to a point where now I'm pretty much painting full time. We'll see how long this lasts, but we'll because I've got a big show that's coming up in September where
Yeah.
it's like 20, 23, 24 pieces, fills like the whole gallery. And, I'm motivated towards that. I mean, that's a good motivator to have when you have something in front of you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's also, for me, it's something that takes a great deal of time. I mean, it's like about a year and a half worth of work going into
Yeah.
it, just like straight. So that's a motivation, but then it's like, you're certainly not, the levels of motivation change on a daily basis. So, and it doesn't mean that all my other obligations have fallen away. I mean, my kids are
No.
older. One of them just graduated with her master's degree just this past
Mhm.
weekend. Um,
Yes.
and my middle son has like a full-time engineering job. Um, and my youngest son is probably going to go off to school. He went to a local college here for a year and was planning on going off. I don't know. He's very independent, so I'll just let him do his thing, which is great.
Yeah.
But like, I still can't be absent to them, or my wife for that matter, uh,
Yeah.
or my house. Which, since I'm home, like I try and take care of my yard and my house. Everything around
Mhm.
here is pretty old, so it requires a lot of maintenance. Um,
I'm sure.
and so you can, especially when you have things that are a little more open-ended, maybe sometimes it's good when there's so many things you have to do, then you become really efficient. But then when you only have to do the one thing, then those other things, those little things, start to become bigger distractions. It's just like,
It's true.
it's like, I see there's a patch of lawn over there that needs seeding. I should probably go do that because it's going to rain on Wednesday. Like, no, like I've got a painting sitting right, literally it's right here. Like,
Yeah.
I've got to
It's
like get on that. But
mhm.
so there's, your motivations may change and your schedule may change, but that path
Mhm.
still needs to be exactly the same. Like that
Mm.
can't change. Like the
Yeah.
direction and the culmination of what it is you want to do doesn't change. And even when this show goes up and it's over, because that's a really, like I said, that's an easy thing to be motivated by, right? Like everybody
Yeah.
wants that. You want that, right?
Absolutely.
Like someone offers
Yeah.
you like a big show, solo show,
Yeah.
like you're just like, yeah, I'm doing the thing.
Yep.
So it's kind of easy to just get yourself up for that sort of stuff. But when
Mhm.
that's done, then what? Right?
Right? Yeah.
But for me, it's like the show is a great motivator, but even that has kind of like, that does box you in a little bit,
Mhm.
because I know the gallerist is wonderful, and she and I are working very much in tandem, and she's allowing me to design the space. I made like a 3D
Yeah.
rendering of the space where I've actually hung all the work already, and I can move it around and show it to her. And um,
I love that you did that. And I know we've talked about that because I was asking you the beginning of this year, like, how do you plan a solo show? Because I've never had that formal education piece. And how do you, like, how does each, I think too, you're a very interesting professor because you've always had a practice.
mm,
Whereas I have seen the local schools around here, and I'll check out the professor, the teachers, and whatever, and it's like, I don't think you should be teaching. Like, you don't have any kind of experience in the field you're sending these kids off into,
yeah,
and giving like really antiquated or bad advice
yeah,
to new students is terrible. And that's one thing that I think. Uh, you really would have been an amazing professor to study under because you do have that thread of having actually worked in the industry you're sending kids off into.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And it changes so
yeah.
fast that that does, some of my teaching did start to feel antiquated, but I'm was also motivated by like I knew that, so I try and keep
Mhm.
current with everything. So that's
Yeah,
why I can go into like a CAD program and design a whole gallery to hang a
yeah.
show in. That's why I
Which
can.
is like such a good idea. Like,
Well, I mean, see, I got to go back to something you said earlier, where you said like
mm,
you didn't have the formal training to be able to
mm,
know how to set up a solo show.
mm.
Guess what? Guess what? Nobody
No,
teaches you that.
nobody teaches you that. Of course they don't. They don't teach you anything you
Nobody teaches
should
you
be
that.
taught. Like,
Because I suppose like there are some sides of an art education, and this is like the con side where it's like, you know, things like money and pragmatic stuff, like setting up a show, how to talk to a gallerist, how well better
mhm,
how not to talk to a gallerist or a collector.
right.
Um, that's kind of like not spoken. That's like an 800-pound gorilla in the middle of the room that nobody talks about, just because it's kind of not part of the feeling of what the art should be. Like the pragmatic side
Mm,
is like it's too pragmatic, it's too logic based. We want to stay in
mm,
a creative zone where we're talking
right.
about these more, you know,
Lofty ideals.
metaphysical sort of things, that
Yeah.
encompasses like the mythology of like what it is to be an artist. Or if you're really academic, like the philosophical and socio-political angles. But
Mhm.
what happens when I get a show? What am I supposed to do? That's like a really good question.
Yeah, right? And,
Why don't you just
like,
come out and tell people?
I would, like, tell me what that course is worth, I will pay for it
Yeah.
because that would be so useful, like, if you ever did, and I'm serious, if you ever did teach a course on it,
Well,
like, I would be into it because it's
now that we're talking about it, I might like do that because it's not there. But the interesting thing
mhm,
is that like, being a teacher, I was never formally trained to be an art professor. N-
okay.
Never. I fell into it. A friend of mine went on sabbatical, like last minute thing. He was single, no family, and he had shows and I did not. I was just trying to get by, but I was still working, still painting and stuff. Um, and he knew that, and he was just like, and he knew I needed to work like wherever because I was just very gig oriented. And he's
Mhm.
just like, "Oh, I got a good one for you. Like, I got this show. I've completely mismanaged my time. I can't teach these classes.
Oh
How
my
about you do
gosh.
it?" And I'm just like, "I can't. I don't know any of this. What are you talking about? Like, I don't want to be responsible for that." And he's just like, and it was interesting because he's the same age as me, and he was
Yeah.
like, gave me a really good piece of advice when it came to teaching because I just took it at its face. He said, "I know what you know. We were trained by the same people. It's like just tell them what you know. That's it." And I was like, "Oh, all right." And I did, and it worked out great. Because the students were just like,
That's
"Wow, no
awesome.
one's ever told me that before." I was like, "Why not?" I was like,
Yeah,
I'm just telling you like what I do and what makes a mistake corrected and successful. Like
yeah,
that's it. Like that's all you need to do. And that's kind of like
yeah,
anything with teaching. You just
yeah.
give the person like the right tools to the pathway to the success, whether it's like a math problem or a painting, it doesn't really matter. You're just
Mm-hmm.
giving tools, and if they apply it, then it's good. And so I was really surprised at some of the reactions. But
Yeah.
since I've hadn't had any formal training, that has been my tactic, is to tell people what I know, like from my professional experience. Like you said, like I've got
Mm-hmm.
street cred, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I've always been a practicing artist, so I kind of know
Yeah.
what it is I'm talking about by virtue of experience, not by virtue of what I've read somewhere. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but at
Which
the
I
same,
think is way more valuable.
it is, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, that can also be like looking at the way other professors teach too. Some of the techniques that they came up with were very um autodidactic. Like they taught themselves how to paint some of these things, and their technique is really weird. So to pass
Mm.
it on to a bunch of people who might be a little more familiar with like the standard techniques of like drawing and painting, and then you come at them, it's just like, okay, so you got this giant still life, so if you finish this strawberry, and then you finish this peach, and then you finish this leaf up here. I knew a painter who painted like that, and like the students were doing that. I'm just like, that's crazy. Like, you can't paint that way. Like, you can paint that way, but
Yeah.
you can't. They have, this is like completely anti every single book they've probably ever read about painting.
Yeah.
And you have to recognize that. So I also
Right.
recognize that like my point of view is a little bit like, it's just mine. And so
Right.
I try to modify everything that I do by kind of giving a caveat, like this is just like a springboard to something else if you can use it.
Right.
I think that's
Mm-hmm.
information that's out there regarding art, or an art practice, or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. It's just like, if you can use it, great. But if you don't think it's useful, just
Throw it
pretend,
out.
pretend it never happened.
Yeah.
It's like being in a critique. So I told students all
Mm-hmm.
the time. It's just like, if you get a couple of people saying the same things, you listen to that. But if you get this
Yeah.
one asshole coming in and just being like, your work sucks, and I don't have anything good to say about it, and I have no advice for you,
Mm.
that you just don't listen to that at all. That's the thing that's going to
Yeah.
stick in your head, but
Yep.
that's got no utility whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
You can't listen to that. You listen to the people, not the people that said nice things. You listen to
Mm-hmm.
the thing that was repeating itself, because that's
Yeah.
the thing that's jumping out at people. That's what you glom onto.
Mm-hmm.
So there's techniques to all this stuff, and it's really all about like objectivity. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so when we were talking about like, what do I do when I do a show? I mean, I can't, I don't, I wouldn't feel like, I'd feel really weird about saying you got to learn AutoCAD or
Mm-hmm.
Google SketchUp and build a 3D model and hang your work in that. And people
Mm-hmm.
are like, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, well, learn it anyway. Like, that would be wrong.
No, but I mean, I think it's very useful because so few people would tell you, well, this is what I do. You
Yeah.
know, and a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of artists have this idea that if they explained their technique, well, now you have the secret knowledge and now you can copy them or something like that. And it's like, no, like everyone has their own lens,
Yes.
right? And then after you mentioned that, I think a little while later, I saw another artist who they just built a model,
Yes.
like a physical model of the gallery, and then put little thumbnails of their work. And I was like, that works too, right?
Yeah.
It's the same concept. But just that putting, instead of it just being in your head, making it real and
Hmm.
envisioning walking through and how the artwork is going to hit, I think is such a useful thing to be able to do because like when I was approaching that solo work, I was like, I'm trying to think about how this would look here, but I don't really know.
Hmm.
And how would this sit and how would this it's tricky, right? Getting scale, getting all of that. So I think that's a really interesting approach though, just to build the gallery
Sure.
in whatever medium would work and then kind of plot it out and be like, actually that doesn't look good there. This should go here.
For sure.
Just yeah, and that like It's almost like precognition, right? Like you want to, before you make the work, like see it first,
Yeah, yeah.
see how it's going to
Oh
hit
god, yeah. I
first.
mean,
Hmm.
planning is definitely everything. It's funny that
Hmm.
you mentioned like the model thing that you saw,
Hmm.
because my motivations behind making this, digital 3D space came
Hmm.
from seeing somebody make a physical model too. It was actually
Okay.
a documentary on Gerhard Richter, and like now he's super famous and he's got tons of assistants and stuff, and it
Hmm.
actually showed them with a model that they built out of foam core of Whitechapel Gallery in London, like super super famous blue chip gallery. He
Yeah.
built it, and they were hanging like little Gerhard Richters in space, and some of his glass sculptures, little plastic things that they put in the middle of the room, and like
Yeah.
around. And I remember seeing that, going, "Oh, that's so cool!" I was like, "I wish I had assistants to make me a space thing." But then I was like, but then this show came up, and I was like, "Wait a second, there's tools to do that where I don't have to build a physical model and have the space to do it and the wherewithal." I mean, I'd probably
Yeah.
screw that up anyway because I'm not really that great with 3D. So, like physical 3D. Um,
Uh-huh.
but digital 3D, like most of those parameters are kind of solved for you because you just like, enter in, all of the sizes and stuff like that, and it just kind of crunches the numbers for you, and then you
Right.
just build space. Of course, you have to have plans of the space in order to be able to build it. Um,
Hmm.
this gallery is new, and they were like, "Oh, I don't know, we don't have those." And I actually had to look up the deed of the building and find the previous owner, which was a cat hospital. And they
Oh.
had done some renovations, and so they had submitted it
Oh.
to the town, and I found all of the size parameters of the lower floor, so I was able to sort of use that to go forward.
That's
So
very resourceful.
I'm a good researcher too. I think I have a lot of my academic side to sort of thank for being able to sort of, figure
Mhm.
that stuff out.
Source that.
But there's
Yeah.
different ways in which to do it. And you actually touched on something that makes me think of something somewhat related, that it's a precognition, or it's pre-visualization, which is
Hmm.
actually a term I use for the things that I build to make my paintings.
Mm.
For the
Hmm.
digital collages I do in Photoshop,
Yeah.
have a massive cache of these things,
Mm.
and they're all just, I call them my previs files. They're
Yeah.
all just like, and that term, the previs thing, comes from, if you've ever watched like the extras on, like, well, we don't watch DVDs anymore, but when we did,
Yeah.
like Pixar films would have like the effects department stuff, and like how they built
Hmm.
the thing, like all these how-to things from like the little storyboards that they'd actually have on physical paper, and then they do a previs of the scene where it's like everything's gray and the characters don't really move, they're just sliding around in the space. It's like really wonky kind of maquettes floating around. And like, it's one of the things I would teach in like my visual narratives class. It's just like, build slowly building these worlds in order to really know what they look like, even if it looks goofy as hell to somebody from the outside.
Yeah.
For you, it's a significant shorthand to be able to take the next jump to the final piece of work. And so,
Absolutely.
like, all of this stuff requires a certain level of pre-visualization, even something that's not art. I'll give you an example of something that's not
Hmm.
art where you do that. So my master's program, like, it came to like the thesis writing. There was like a little thesis writing seminar that they had. There was some practical stuff in there too. Of course,
Hmm.
that's hermetically sealed inside the academic bubble, so it wasn't like an outside world practice thing. But it was like, how do you write the thesis? We'd already
Hmm.
written so many papers anyway. And hang on,
Hmm.
mosquito in front of my, so I don't have the screen down on my front doors here, so
Oh no.
bugs
You're
are
already getting into mosquito season? Blech.
yeah, yeah, it rained a lot a couple days ago.
Blech.
But so the professor was just like, so you're synthesizing some of your older papers, so here's a Venn diagram where you can do this, and here's this like expanded bubble thing where like this idea, here's this, and I'm like writing this stuff down. I was like, I can't use any of this. I don't even know what this is.
Yeah.
Like, how does that apply to what I'm doing? And then, because she was just listing different techniques, then she came up with like, or you could approach the thesis in the same way that you approach your work. I was like,
Mm.
what does that mean? It's like if you're physically like working on an easel or on a wall with your work, then tack the thesis up on the wall and edit it that way. Like literally like
Huh.
take like highlight markers and just like and start pulling papers off the wall like that kind of
Huh.
and I was like, that I could do that. That's how I work
Mhm.
with my regular work. I could do that. And it worked great. It was so cool. I was like
Yeah.
amazed because it's not painting, obviously,
Yeah.
but it's just like
It's all there.
that physical action of what I was doing was mimicking something that I was very familiar with
Mm.
this material that was like kind of intimidating and
Hmm.
not as familiar a world because it's all about writing and
Hmm.
editing and all that stuff. And
Hmm.
but the similarity with the physical action was allowing me to get into that space more comfortably
Hmm.
and
And
do it that way.
it's like taking this interface of your process and
Mhm.
applying it to something totally different, but that's already inbuilt
Yes.
where you're like, I can do this. I
Yeah,
already
it's
know
like
this.
the muscle memory is there for that part.
Yeah.
So that doesn't require any more thinking. You just go the other thing, you can sort of put all your attention into that. If I had to do it
Yeah.
with Venn diagrams or thought bubbles, I don't even know what that one was called. Uh, I'd have to think about what even is that while I'm trying to do this
Mhm.
other thing, and that wouldn't
Yeah.
work at all. So like
Yeah.
it just would have crossed all the wires. And so when it came to going back to when it came to building the 3D model of the gallery
Mm-hmm.
was also quite similar to the way that I pre-visualize my work digitally before I start painting
Mm-hmm.
as well. And so
Yeah.
that even though there was like architecture and lots of straight lines and like axes and things like that, where I'm just like, oh, that's math, I can't. But there was something to the interface and the way I was approaching it, just taking like little paintings and hanging them on little digital paintings and hanging them on
Hmm.
digital walls that I was just like, okay, this feels kind of familiar.
Hmm.
It's
I
kind of,
can do this.
yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say you do a digital collage. I'm like that. I know a few of the other artists that I've talked to are like that, and it's kind of comforting in a way to know that it's not really a new practice. Like I think
Right.
that's something that people have been doing for a long time
I think so.
is is like yeah, the kind of collaging kind of especially when you're talking about figurative work that you're going to spend a lot of time on.
Mhm.
It's not like Singer Sargent where he's done a bunch of live paint studies and then, he gets people to like sit for a long time. That's wonderful, but we have photography now and
Right.
I can kind of
That
like
was also very impractical at some points because
absolutely.
one painting that I can mention where the poor woman sat for 80 sittings because he kept scraping her head out at the end of every
Yeah.
session and
Yeah, because he
until she,
he
until
he
she
had some
cried.
I think he had some crazy notion that like if he couldn't capture it in a sitting, he'd get rid of it.
Yep.
And like part of me is like, you're insane. But the other part of me is like, that's actually, yeah, I see where you're coming from. I get it because I think we're all a little obsessive and ridiculous to some extent.
Well,
Um,
he set this is the thing about setting your own parameters. He set a parameter for himself that he never wavered from. He
mhm,
wanted the painting to look effortless. And
right.
if it looked labored to him, he'd just scrape it out. And what
Mhm.
it's so weird to think like it took 80 shots in order to do that, but because that's not effortless, that's a ton of effort
No,
you've
that's a
literally thrown down
bunch.
the drain. But it to the viewer, it looks effortless, and that's the goal. So,
Right.
and, it does seem crazy in terms of like that's the process you have to do in order to get that, but like
Mhm.
he stuck to it, and that's why he's so well known and his work is so beautiful because it does
Yeah.
look effortless, but there's just so much more that goes on behind it. And so I think
Mhm.
for us mortal beings who are artists, unlike him, um, I think being able to plan things out, again, representational, realistic, figurative type artists, being able to plan things out where we're not so surprised by something that happens in the painting and it just it becomes a massive mistake that's really hard to fix.
Yeah.
um, having that planning in front of you, solving a few of the basic problems that you would normally encounter before you get to the big painting is
Mhm.
like super important. And yeah, and we
Absolutely.
have photography now, and now we have like digital tools. Like you said, you
Mhm.
talk to other artists who do that as well.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's a natural extension of it. I mean, back when I was doing illustration, even in school, we didn't have the internet. I used to go to like the library, the
A library?
New York Library actually had a picture reference file where you would
Wow.
check out like pieces of photography that somebody just cut like one type of object out of hundreds of thousands of magazines and pasted it to a board and put a little sheet over it, and it was all categorized like the Dewey
Wow.
Decimal System, and you'd go there and you'd rent them as an illustrator to, be able to trace or copy or whatever you needed to do
Wow.
as picture reference. So that was like
Hmm.
very Flintstones era kind of technology compared to now. But the
Mhm.
whole idea of, collaging things digitally in order to
Mhm.
sort of pre-visualize what it is that you want to do, it's a
Mhm.
really old idea. We're just
Yeah.
using new tools, which is
Yeah.
not, just a caveat to everyone, that's not what AI does. AI does something
Yeah.
completely different. AI
Mhm.
doesn't do the process of curating those particular pictures and moments that you're choosing in
Mhm.
order to put them into the collage. AI is just like, I'm just going to grab all this stuff and I'll be right back and I'll have something for you. And then you look at it and go, oh, that's weird. It's like, what did you
Yeah.
do? Let's try that again. And like, it's never about you when,
Mhm.
if anyone uses AI for those reasons. It's
Yeah.
really collaging stuff, but it's doing it in this brainless, bizarre way, just trying to sort
Mhm.
of like match the prompts to the picture, which is really just, no one ever really thinks about this. It's a series of zeros and ones of code over here that's trying to match a series of zeros and ones of code over here. One is text and one is a picture.
Mhm.
And it's just like a kid's matching game where it's like you turn it over and it's like, oh, look, it's a lion over here. And then there's a lion in the group over here. And you match them. That's what
Yeah.
it's doing. It's doing it
Yeah.
on like a kindergartner level. And so
Yeah.
that's why when you get something that pops out on the other end, it's always nonsense. There's always some weird
Mhm.
nonsensical thing happening inside whatever it is that it did. And it's unusable. I will admit I've tried it
Mhm.
just because I
Mhm.
needed to know if it
What
was
it
a
was.
useful tool. And
Mhm.
it's so full of the possibilities of mistakes, which it makes all the time, that
Mhm.
it's not useful, because then you have to fix that in order to sort of like move to the next stage.
I know you have a lot of thoughts about AI, and I really love your take on it. But I'm wondering, and this is what a lot of these AI bros are saying all the time. Well, it's getting better all the time. Do you ever think there will be a place or a time when it will be so good at doing match and like seeing what you want to see that it will ever be useful for artists?
Um, the best, not, no, not for artists, not
No.
for artists. No, no. What it's best for is like disposable, commercial grade level, like generated like commercials, or like
Yeah.
really cheap movies that go like, back in the day they would go straight to Blockbuster,
Right.
never make it into the movie. Now they'd go straight to like some obscure streaming network instead, or they'd
Right.
be used for a commercial. But even
Hmm.
there, they're still being rejected. As recently as this Christmas,
Hmm.
McDonald's tried to put,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was so goofy that people were just like, "This is the backlash." It wasn't even backlash; it was just people making fun of it. Like, this
Oh
is
yeah.
inane. And okay, maybe that gets better, but I don't think people are going to be able to unsee it. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's just low grade disposable imagery, which is
Mm-hmm.
still in and of itself a problem, because that kind
Mm-hmm.
of lowers the bar for everybody. It's like that saying where it's just like a rising tide lifts all boats.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're at like low tide and everything stinks, well, like the whole town stinks now. Like if you're
Yeah.
reach the bottom of like what art can do and make it this like crappy base level disposable product,
Hmm.
then the good stuff seems, you would say, oh, you would think, oh, that's, it seems better by comparison. It's just like, no, less people will care about it because there is still a contingency of people that don't care and will use the disposable product, that
Hmm.
they don't care that much. And
Yeah.
so then, so your audience starts to shrink, and
Hmm.
the possibility of an audience that might be one day become more knowledgeable about better images, better movies, better quality.
All of that is shrinking.
Yeah, that opportunity
Hmm.
will
Hmm.
go away because they've just got something really quick that they can get the quick endorphin rush
Consume.
from and
Hmm.
move on.
It's kind of like junk food
Yeah,
in a
there you go.
sense, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like there's, and this is something that I think they've done a lot of research on. So, like for example, post-war, coffee really wanted to be a hit in the Asian market because now this market has opened up.
Hmm.
But nobody in Japan, for example, was drinking coffee. They weren't coffee drinkers.
Right.
They drank tea. So what they did was they made this coffee flavored candy and they made it very accessible to small
Mm.
children. So these children grew up with this flavor and they liked it. And
Hmm.
when they got to be adults, they became coffee drinkers. So now you do have a market because
Right. You
you've primed them.
you trained a generation.
You've trained a generation. And I feel like McDonald's is like that,
Hmm.
right? They access that child market and now you have nostalgic feelings, which nostalgia is like something that's like really in our base brain, right?
Yes.
Um, once they've tapped into that, you will always like, oh, I really just want a McDonald's burger. Like you just get these cravings for this nostalgic thing. And you feel sick afterward and you hate yourself, but you still bought the burger, right?
Yeah.
Like and there's a lot of research about how priming a child can create a consumer
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
And I wonder about that a lot because I mean I have younger children, and so children that are growing up with all of this AI generated imagery, um, we're making them we're dumbing them down
Yeah.
and making that taste so much lower of a bar, um, that it will be nostalgic for these children in 20, 30 years. Oh, I remember when AI was still garbage, and I loved that. It was so cute, you know? And like I was like, I'm like afraid
Yeah. Yeah.
for these generations coming up because like I look back at what was in our home sometimes when I was a kid, and it was like Monet, and which would have been considered kind of low grade in Monet's time,
Hmm.
right? It was seen as sort of dumbed down art at
Right.
that time, like the Impressionists.
Hmm.
Or I'll think of Art Nouveau was such a big thing when I was a kid. There was Art Nouveau cards and prints and everything, and those things still influence me today, right? That idea of a woman being symbolic of a season or a thing or right like that whole idea of a woman almost being like this avatar for this other thing, very much a thread throughout art history and throughout my work, throughout your work, I think too.
Hmm.
um and you wonder how is that going to influence like these upcoming generations because now that I'm older, I see how you prime a market for later.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you prime that market when it's young to be a forever consumer later. And so a lot of like art, music, things like this, you create that when that person is young and they don't really deviate very much from it. Like there have been studies about how people consume music and there's a cutoff age where you stop listening to new music.
Hmm.
And that's something that I've had to be very cognizant about is like maybe I'm not going to go turn on the radio, but I do want to like keep exploring new music because there's always going to be something cool out there, right? That you can, but that sense of taste has never really changed, right?
Yeah.
I always like the punk music. I always like the rock. Like I'm never, even though contemporary tastes have changed, like that inbound, that thing that you liked when you were 12 has never really changed.
But that's absolutely true. I didn't know that story about Japan. That's like super interesting.
Yeah.
Mm. Uh, yeah, leave it to Western culture to ruin a awesome Eastern
Right.
culture.
Oh
Um,
man, the more I've learned about American history, when it comes to like what the CIA was doing in the 70s and what you realize like how insidious that marketplace thing has been in greater global culture and how much they have shaped
yeah,
things by trying to get into new markets. They've changed the world with it.
yeah. I mean, the attempt to create a monoculture based around Western American ideology
Consumerism.
and consumerism is like,
Hmm.
yeah, it hasn't been good for everybody.
Hmm.
It's interesting though too, and you're right because I'm the age that I am. I mentioned it already. I'm not going to mention it again. No, it's fine. I'm in my mid 50s and there's no going back. But yeah, it's just I feel kind of funny like listening to like the heavy metal that I listened to when I was a teenager. Um,
Hmm.
and I still enjoy it now. Although there's some bands I'll be like, wow, like I really wasn't picking up on that like hyper toxic level misogyny going on in these lyrics.
No, it was like,
But but so that gets filtered out. But some of the other stuff still stays, and it does have
hmm.
longevity. Some of those bands are even still around, and those guys are in their 70s now.
Hmm.
Um, but like it's interesting because it's also the way in which the thing is made. There's I'm not saying that there's a nostalgia built into that, but it can tap into that from like kind of an end around. So for instance, like McDonald's fries, like when I was a little kid, I know for a fact because of just out of curiosity and also seeing a lot of films and nutritional studies about it, like
Hmm.
the ingredients in the fries and the way in which they were made is like wildly different than it is.
Hmm. Well, it's fried in beef tallow.
Right. And
Yeah,
it's
which has
also,
a completely different flavor.
and there's also just like a very specific amount of salt. There's a very specific
Yeah.
amount of preservatives that'll keep it crisper longer when it comes out, and you can just put it under the heat lamp.
Hmm.
Technology in how it's made has turned it into very much of like a bag of Doritos level kind of product. Not that it
Hmm.
was great for you back in the
No, it
70s,
wasn't. It
but
wasn't good for you then either.
it was okay compared to what it is now. You know,
Yeah.
it's if you tasted those two things side by side, I'm sure you'd be like, these are two different things.
Oh, totally different
Um,
things.
so
Even
it's
if you took Doritos from when I was a kid versus now,
yeah,
completely different level of flavor. And I saw a video actually about French or European people coming over to the States and eating Doritos from here, and they're just like it's like crack, like they just can't stop eating it, and they're like, oh, there's like 7 bags of
yeah, and that's
Doritos like
and,
surrounding.
and therein lies like the insidiousness. It's just like it's
Mhm.
meant to addict you,
It
but
is, yeah.
so the way in which those things are made, it's like they're supposed to be the same product, but it's not. So the
Mhm.
nostalgia might take you back to
Mhm.
McDonald's, eat it, but it's not really the food anymore because it's not
No,
even the same.
no.
So, we have nostalgia. So you mentioned the music thing for like certain
Mhm.
types of music, and you mentioned like punk and
Mhm.
and heavy rock and like stuff like that.
Mhm.
And like you hear, but you also hear like the more modern music that's being made through a conduit that wasn't that way at all way back
Yeah.
when. Like
Mhm.
those were like, full albums that were like, 30-40 minutes aside. Maybe there was a concept running through the whole thing.
Yep.
Maybe a single, maybe not coming out of
Mhm.
the album. most of the time when you put on a record, you'd put on the record. I mean, LPs, but also cassettes or compact discs. You'd play
Yeah.
the thing like
Yeah.
most of the way through. Sometimes you
Hmm.
can pick out the track that you like best, but the idea was like the artist would make it so that you were supposed to listen to the whole thing at some point.
Yeah.
Uh, Now, like music is being developed just for and on TikTok, which is like this very truncated format. So you're making these songs that are the equivalent to like commercial jingles that don't
Hmm.
really have a pre-chorus, that don't really have the same kind of structure.
Hmm.
And I hear this stuff and I'm just like, is there something else to this piece here? And it's just like, that's it. No, that's the
That
song.
was the
I'm like,
thing.
like, how is that a song? Like, that's not
Hmm.
even structured like one. It's because
Hmm.
the way in which it was made is so different. So maybe they're trying
Yeah.
to mimic something you've heard before, but they're making it through a completely different process that's like very unrelated. So, like,
Mm.
any new music you hear now, that if you're nostalgic for something like punk or like something heavy, like
Hmm.
this band from Austin called Die Spitz, it's an all female band and
Hmm.
they're amazing. I highly recommend checking them out. Uh,
Hmm.
they're like an amalgam of like, Sabbath and the Melvins and like, all of this like heavy stuff and punk stuff kind of all
Hmm.
together. And then they had this sort of like girl school / runaways sort of like presentation of themselves. You know,
Right.
they're kind of girly girls and then they're not, and then they're scary, and then they're like, and they kind of embody all these different things, but they
Hmm.
are just a quartet playing their actual own instruments and
Yeah.
touring, and it's like the traditional way of making music. So
Yep.
it's recognizable on a nostalgic sense because it's calling on all of these historical music genres,
Hmm.
recognizable in the sense that it's being made in the same way, and so
Yeah.
it all kind of clicks.
And
So
that's kind of what I've been looking for lately. Like, a few years back, I discovered this band called Starcrawler,
mhm.
and instead of like looking for polished music videos or whatever, I just start searching like
Mhm.
band live, and like I think they did the cover for the new Pet Cemetery. They did a cover of the Ramones song
Okay.
Pet Cemetery, and yeah, I found them doing a show in like a little grungy bar, and they're playing live. They're all playing their instruments, like I've started doing that more just because I want to see, is this for real? Like, is this how are they playing this? Or um there's a few bands where I've been like, okay, if there's two guys, there's like a drummer and a bassist, how are they getting this sound?
Mhm.
Like Royal Blood, for example. And yeah, they're using technology, but it's still an actual band,
Yeah,
right? Where
yeah,
they're
for sure.
actually like playing their instruments. Um, and just finding that like that live thing has been really um a big piece of like getting back into like looking at new music,
Mhm.
because there was a time where the recording you heard was the band and nothing else,
Right.
and there were mistakes in it. I mean, one of the famous mistakes is like the Beatles, like that I forget what I think it was it Roxanne or something. It was one of these things where um he said the words wrong, or no, I'm think that's a different song. But anyways, yeah, like lyrically they mixed something up and then it just became canon from there, and
Yeah.
it was hilarious. And um
I
there's
just
little
I just
things
learned
like that where it's like it's so human.
I just learned something. You just reminded me of it, and I think everyone can relate to this because everyone knows this song, "Sailing" by
Mhm.
Christopher Cross.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't
So
know.
you know that song, right? I mean, it's like
Okay.
it's been commercialized like everywhere.
Probably heard it. I
Mhm.
don't it doesn't ring a bell, but I'm terrible with names,
Oh,
so
okay.
there's that.
Yeah. Just look up "Sailing" by Christopher Cross and just listen to like the first 10 seconds.
Yep.
This orchestral music kind of builds into it, but then the song starts. That
Mm.
little moment there of that orchestral like little buildup is a mistake. The engineer just kind
Oh.
of like pressed the wrong button and played this orchestral part that's supposed to be like later in the song. And like when they listened back to it because they were mastering it, and it just kind of got glommed onto the beginning. And then the producer was just like, "What's that?" And the artist Christopher Cross himself was like, "That's not supposed to be there." He's like, "Why not? That's amazing." And they're just like, "It is," and they were just like, and they left it, and like you hear that opening little thing, and you can just cut the song off right there. You know exactly what song it is.
Right.
It's like one of those like game show things. It's just like, what song is
Mhm.
this? 2 seconds of that, and but it's like not even really part of the song. It was an accident. Um,
Yeah.
so it's like, and I think I want to sort of bring this back to like the art making
Hmm.
thing, because
Absolutely.
you can well, all right, make this into a coherent thought. Every painting that I make,
Hmm.
there's always a problem.
Yeah.
And it's always something. And I talked already about like pre-visualizing stuff and
Hmm.
making sure you don't have problems like while you're doing it, but there's always
Hmm.
something. And actually I realize now, and this actually, I started this during grad school, I kind
Hmm.
of make problems for myself on purpose
Right.
because I learn from them. And that's why sometimes it's actually hard to come to a painting, wake up in the morning and go do it, because I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like,
Yeah. And
and this
that's
could
the
really
cool
suck.
part.
It is the cool,
It
but
is. It could suck.
it's also intimidating, because it's just like, oh, like I'm not sure if I want to get into this right now, because I have a feeling I'm going to walk away from this and be like upset at my,
Mm-hmm.
after 30 years of doing this, still inability to solve this thing right out of the gate. Um,
Hmm.
I That's my neighbor's dog, not my dog. Um,
It's okay. That's
um,
life, right?
it's true,
Yeah.
but the once I get through that issue,
Hmm.
yeah, I'll be like, oh, okay, like that's how you solve that problem. And so
Right.
now I know how to do that. So I might build it into the next painting, but it's not going to be a problem. It's going to be something else. And
Hmm.
so like there's a motivation inherent in that, where it's like I mentioned with Sargent, it's about like just moving forward as an artist and like solving those things. So you mix in like weird stuff. Not like, the Christopher Cross example was for sailing was a little bit of an accident,
Hmm.
Bob Ross-ish sort of sense, where it's like
Yes.
happy little
Happy
tree,
accident.
suddenly it came alive over here. It's not
Hmm.
exactly that, but it's just like, how do I manipulate this color and not make it look like crap?
Hmm.
How do I mix it out? How does it mix on the canvas itself? Uh,
Yeah.
those are things that are like these unknowns, and it's just like, I'm just gonna try. And then
Yeah.
it works, and if it doesn't, I'll know right away.
Absolutely. And do you think that that is something you do subconsciously, or is this a conscious thought when you're planning out your piece?
It's a little bit of both. It's a
Okay.
little bit of both. When I'm pre-visualizing, like for instance, well, my work, like,
Hmm.
well, you can see it back here. There's like
Yeah.
usually
Nice.
like there's a much larger area of like one color, and then there's these accents colors
Hmm.
with geometric shapes kind of woven in throughout the work. So
Hmm.
I'm kind of like basing it off this two color system within each work.
Hmm.
But to pre-visualize it, here's another mosquito. In Photoshop
Hmm.
is one thing, because that's light coming out of a screen at my eyeballs. And so that color
Hmm.
looks one way there. But if I'm taking opaque paint and putting it on a surface, and
Yeah.
light's bouncing through that to the most opaque part, back out into my eyeballs, that's a totally different optical experience.
It is.
So when I'm
Absolutely.
mixing that out and I'm looking at the screen being like, I don't, okay, let's see. And it's like, that's not it. And maybe I'll do like, where'd it go? Oh, here it is. Sorry, I'm off screen.
That's
I
okay. We can still hear you.
just wanted to grab this a little color study
Oh, okay.
I'm working on right now. So
Huh.
sometimes when I'm very unsure, like I'll work it out this way, and I'll do like a little thing of like swatches and stuff. Um,
Yeah.
just so I know exactly what the formula is that I use, because it's all made up.
Hmm.
It's not like
Yeah.
following any particular um, guidebook of like, oh, here's how to mix this very proprietary, strange color. Like I'm just doing it and just trying to get it to work in the context of the one piece.
Mhm.
But sometimes, because if I might be using a color combination, and that I just showed you is one of them,
Mhm.
it's like this sort of burnt sienna kind of environment. Like,
Mhm.
I've never really mixed that out for a painting before, not quite like that, and not
Right.
in context with whatever else is going on in the painting, with the figure and the landscape and the concept itself. Like, I can see that in the pre-visualization that, like, okay, I've built in a problem there because I don't know what that I don't know what that's gonna be when I put it physically, in paint onto a canvas or a panel. Um,
Mhm.
so during the previs part when I'm just building, I was like, oh, this could be interesting. This could be interesting. I'm like not saying to myself, this could be a problem. I'm just saying, oh,
Right.
this could look really cool. But
Yeah.
then when I look at it and I pick up my palette knives to start mixing paint, I'm like, this could be a problem. like, how do we solve this? It's like, well, I've got these things in my hand. It's time to solve it.
Mhm.
So it's both subconscious and conscious. Like,
Yeah.
in the past, I've done it consciously in order to sort of grow as a painter.
Mhm.
I mean, it's part of me that doesn't want to do that because I just want everything to just go perfectly. And if I
Yeah.
just eliminate certain, like, X factors
Mhm.
I don't know in the concept, and I was like, I'm going to make this color I'll just do another blue and orange one. I know how that works.
Yeah.
Um, but that doesn't work for the concept. So
Right.
I have to have something different in there. And maybe it's a combination of things that I haven't encountered before. Um,
Mhm.
and I need that atmospheric um, effect, I suppose, for lack of a better word, in order to sell
Mhm.
the whole thing. But
Mhm.
it's got to work. If it doesn't work, then it's not that part's not going to work either. So to bring up Vincent Desiderio again, he has this term called the technical narrative. So it's
Mhm.
like the way in which you build the thing is very much embedded into the concept of the thing.
Right.
So, in some cases, it could be the facture of the paint, could be, like you've built up a paint surface, which I don't do. That's one thing that some people do that could be part of the technical narrative. It could
Mhm.
be, the type of palette that you're using.
Mhm.
It could be the composition that you're making. It could also be the compositional reference point to some other maybe famous work that you're sort of like trying to embed
Mhm.
in there. All of
Mhm.
those things together with the concept of the painting itself have to work in tandem with one another in order to make the painting work. At least for me. Like,
Mhm.
that's where I'm at in my head when I'm doing
Mhm.
stuff. It's like all of these different layers need to make
Mhm.
like a really good sandwich, I guess.
Yeah.
They need to, it's more like, puzzle pieces that all kind of fit together. But they're
Mhm.
puzzle pieces that, like, some exist conceptually and some exist physically, and some exist as color and some exists as like hidden narrative. Like, they're
Right.
kind of abstract in the realms in which they operate, but they actually all have to mesh anyway.
Mhm.
And
That's what I think is so interesting about your work because it to to a layman, to people who maybe are like just kind of passing through and they see your work, it looks simple in the sense that you have a very limited palette, right?
mhm,
Like you were saying, you're just using two colors, really, essentially.
yep,
Even though they're it's not two tubes of paint. We're very much like two colors.
yeah,
Um, and I think a lot of the skill and all that planning that you do, and and like you say, all the layers that you've inbuilt into your composition, and even just like that art education piece, that's years and years of your time
yeah,
that you've invested in understanding art history. Nobody's gonna get that on face value.
no,
uh, that is hard. That the limited thing that joining that conversation with artists who have died, you know.
Mhm.
There's that, and that's really what you're doing when you bring art history into your work, and you're having this conversation with people who aren't with us anymore,
Yeah.
and they've left us a legacy that we can still talk about.
Mhm.
And doing it in like your contemporary world, being able to talk about that and what it means to you as an individual, that's a very difficult task to give yourself. Not unlike Sargent, who wanted to make sure he caught that person in that day, in that
Mhm.
moment. Being able to uh, conceptualize your work in that context where you're really taking everybody's voices and and giving it your own take. It that I think that's something that maybe people don't acknowledge very often, that what you're doing is actually quite difficult.
Yeah, no, thanks for recognizing that, and
Mhm,
it's there's a bunch of different things built into it too. It's not just talking about that
mm.
part, that historical part, it's actually talking to those painters across
That's
time.
true. Yeah, very
I'm
true.
trying to have a dialogue with that because there's so much to learn from
Mhm.
when I engage in that completely. The only way I can engage with it, I don't know any real witches. And maybe if I did, I'd say, could you contact, some good artists for me?
Yeah.
The only way I can engage with that is to like make the work and
Hmm.
engage through that conduit. That it's not a time machine, but it kind of
Mm.
is because I'm sort of mimicking some of the moves or maybe some of the thought processes that these artists over time have done. I mean, you look at somebody like Manet and you look at that singular painting he did of like the fifer. It's just like a kid
Mm.
playing a flute in like a revolutionary outfit just by
Mhm.
himself. It's almost like a character design study. It's a very interesting modernist painting in that
Yeah.
respect. But you look at his face and it's just this like every boy face,
Yeah.
almost like a comic version of a little boy face.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden you see it repeated in Picasso's pink and blue period, and you see it
Mm.
repeated, that face repeated in Arshil Gorky's, portrait, self-portrait of him and his mother. These are
Mm.
artists talking to each other across time
They
in that
are. Yeah.
motif. Like they're doing
Hmm.
it on purpose. You might be like,
Oh
oh, that's an
yeah.
interesting coincidence. It's like, no, no, no.
No,
Good painters. They
they were
knew
doing it on purpose.
they were doing it on
Yeah.
purpose. And so I'm part of
Hmm.
that legacy. And I want to hitch my
Hmm.
wagon to that and keep that going, not just because I'm trying to ride on the coattails of that. It is so not obvious in my work that I'm doing that. Like you said,
Hmm.
people aren't going to pick up on that. No, it's for me.
No.
It's for me.
Yeah.
I want to feel
Hmm.
like I'm part of that and that I can also learn from it in tandem.
Yeah. And that was something that's interesting to me. And I feel like not enough art books touch on it, at least not the ones that I've found. Um, the process. Like, they'll touch on it like a little bit, but it's like, to me, that's the more interesting thing. I was looking into Klimt's work and the reason why he used so much gold, and it came out that his dad was a goldsmith, I believe.
That's right.
And so he was very much brought up in the church and like saw all these very illuminated paintings, and
Mhm.
that was part of what stayed with him for so long. And I was like, I l- I love the way he would build up into his, and then put the gold leaf over, or the silver leaf or whatever.
Mhm.
And I've I've tried to find some literature about his process. It's like, I don't really care what was happening in his life, I'm sorry, or his conceptual whatever. Like, that's fine and interesting, but like, I would love to just know, how did he apply that to
Mhm.
that piece? What was he like doing with his paintbrushes? Like, what would, like, if you could go back and talk to an artist, like, show me your process. I would love to see that, because I think it speaks a lot to what's actually going on. Especially if you're a painter, you're going to, oh, yes, like, And that's again like a meme of like painters at museums, you know, they're like this close, like I want to see how did you do that, you know? Um, and I actually say you kind of brought up something that that made me like, oh, I need to actually like add this to a roster of questions I have. If you could go back in time and talk to any artist, but just one, who would it be?
Mm, that's a great question. Hmm. Okay, well, I guess we'd have to go really far back to like the Low Country Renaissance, so I could like track down somebody like Hans Holbein,
Mm,
because oil painting was like new-ish
yeah.
back then in like 1500s, and yet if you look at his portrait of Sir Thomas More, which is in the Frick collection in New York City,
Mm,
which every time I go to New York, that's usually a stop for me. The Frick collection is wonderful anyway, and it's really
mm-hmm,
a Met, so I can kind of do both. But that
mm-hmm.
painting, like always, it never fails to make me go, "How is this 600 years old?" And it looks like that, like
Oh,
the sleeves in his costume and like whatever station that office that he held, these puffy, sort of like the it starts at the elbow and ends the wrist, sort of like bands
yeah.
that are just the forearm for some reason, but they're
Uh-huh.
these puffy alizarin crimson velvet sleeves, and they just look like they were painted a couple hours ago. Like they're so
Really?
incredible, and like I'm like, how how did he know to do that when oil paint was only like 100 years old? Like
It's
nobody really
crazy. And
knew
I've
how
always
to use it.
read read that alizarin crimson's really transient and doesn't age well.
Yeah, so clearly he didn't use actually alizarin crimson.
Okay.
It's just I'm using
Okay.
that as a color reference.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
back then I think it was made with elderberries and it just turned brown immediately. Um,
Oh wow.
whatever he used, he got that effect, that like red purple effect,
Oh.
really strong and obviously very permanent. Um,
Mm,
and it's just so amazing. And so just painters during that time, they like they were coming out of the medieval period, and like the Renaissance was starting to come into its own. So there was some wonkiness that was happening. I mean, people look at like the Jan van Eyck, Arnolfini portrait, the one of
mm.
like the couple, and there's that convex mirror behind them where you can see
Yes.
the artist painting and whatever. And
Hmm.
both the man and the woman look like Vladimir Putin for some reason.
Yeah.
Like
What was up with
like
that?
there's these like weird like medieval sort of wonkiness that still hasn't been like
Hmm.
fully realized into a more humanist Renaissance period, but the
Hmm.
quality of the paint level just like went through the roof when oil painting was
Yeah.
introduced, and these guys just mastered it like right out of the gate. So that would be my questions to people like Hans Holbein the younger, would be
Hmm.
like, what are you doing? Like, how did you know to do this? And do you
Mm.
did you know this has lasted for over 600 years, by the way? Like,
It's
how did you build that into this thing? He probably would be like, I don't, well, for one thing, who are you and where'd you come from? You're wearing weird clothes. But the
yeah.
other thing would be, I didn't plan for it to last 600 years. I'm just painting it this way. So it'd
Yeah.
also be a discovery of like how important like technique and materials were to those artists at that time, and
Hmm.
how good it was. I mean, we talk about like, the original McDonald's fries and like the new ones.
Yeah.
Like
Right?
think about the materials back then, and it's lasted for so long. It's just like,
Hmm.
man, that stuff was just overbuilt. And so,
Hmm.
like, what would have been like to paint with that kind of stuff? It would have been amazing.
Hmm. Well, it's interesting to me you bring that up. Like that technique is so lost, right?
Mm,
Uh, I had the good fortune of meeting my husband's grandfather. So he was a kid during World War II. I think he would have been in that, yeah, very young, like under 10 kind of age. So he was an older gentleman at the time from Germany. And at that time, he was a house painter, a journeyman house painter.
mhm,
However, that title doesn't mean what it means today. he was telling me some of the technique they would have done back then. And so a lot of that was like grinding their own paints. So
Oh wow.
they would make their own pigments. And that was part of that was just part of basic house painting.
Hmm.
They would learn how to do faux wood grain. And
Okay.
so, and they would learn how to do faux marble. Um, they would learn how to do all these things we would now consider something that you would learn in like special effects,
Hmm.
right? Like for movies and stuff, which is even then that's getting out of fashion. It's become
Yeah, unfortunately.
something that's going out of style, I guess. Um, but he was telling me about some of these techniques that they would do because there wasn't latex paint. Everything was oil based.
Mm.
Everything was right. So just even that little thing, like nobody does that anymore.
Right.
Nobody even knows it anymore. He's like, I know that all this knowledge is dying with me. He passed away a couple years ago, but like even just that, we're swiftly moving away from these things that we're known for ever,
Mm.
right? Like he knew about just like painting frescoes, things like that that people would have done in their homes.
Yeah.
That just doesn't nobody does that anymore.
No.
Uh he showed me a piece of wood that he had bought some piece of furniture, and I don't remember what it was, but he changed it, and so he wanted it to all the wood grain to look uniform. So he had repainted it to look like wood grain. You couldn't tell.
Yeah, that's amazing stuff. I think
Hmm.
you're right. I mean, it's like definitely a dying art, and like a house painter being able to do that, like that's
Right?
completely unknown. But
Hmm.
those skill sets have been kind of relegated to these very niche areas, like you said, like
Hmm.
visual effects in movies, and that's being replaced by like digital effects.
Hmm. Hmm.
Although there's like anything, there's like trends to sort of like hold on to that. I mean,
Hmm.
part of the industry is moving on to like all digital stuff, and maybe
Yeah.
unfortunately AI, but there's
Hmm.
always going to be a contingency of people who still can do that, but the niche gets smaller and smaller,
Hmm.
unfortunately, and
Yeah.
that's kind of why they either go away or you just don't hear about them as much because so few people are doing it, even though
Yeah.
it may still be alive. And I think oil painting is like what we do,
Hmm.
oil painting like artworks, 2D paintings on 2D surfaces. I mean, that's why I do so much historical referentiality embedded into the work because that's the only thing that keeps it really relevant. Because doing it in the
Hmm.
21st century, making paintings in 2026, it's kind of like if you want a representational image, I mean, it's right here, like all of them,
Yeah.
pretty much. Like,
Yeah.
so what do you need a painting for?
That for. Yeah.
Um, and it's for totally different purposes. There was a time in Holbein's time, all the way up until Nadar and the beginning of photography,
Hmm.
that painting had a totally different discourse.
Yeah.
And now, and it was at the top of the art hierarchy, at the top of the pyramid.
Hmm.
And now
Yeah.
it's like it's not. It might not even be on the pyramid. I don't know, but it's not at the top. There's like digital
Hmm.
and moving pictures and all that stuff. It's a completely different discourse of how to talk about artwork,
Hmm.
what it really is. But what's interesting is that painting's still a part of it. Like even the layman,
Hmm.
as you were
Yeah.
saying before, still
Hmm.
recognizes that. So there's something to that. So you have to, as the
Yeah.
artist, tap into not just that nostalgia thing piece, but also bring it forward in time.
Hmm.
You can't
Hmm.
rely on what it used to be. There's a
Hmm.
lot of amazing painters out there that work in these, like what I like to call neo atelier systems,
Yes.
like schools of painting where you're painting perceptually from life, whether it's like
Hmm.
still life, a marble statue, or the actual model.
Hmm.
And there's different tiers in which you have to sort of graduate through drawing the bust and then drawing the still life and then drawing the life model, and then the next year you do it, but now it's painting. It's all
Right.
three of those things, and you kind of scale through that way. And the people
Hmm.
that come out of those types of academies are incredibly skilled. I mean, they could paint circles around me. Like I've
Hmm.
been in those places and met those
Right.
people. I'm just like, the skill level is off the charts, but
Yeah.
the paintings say
Not a
it's
whole lot.
it's just a decoration. You're
Unfortunately.
you're
And
doing a 19th century painting in 2026.
yeah,
You can't read it the same way.
no.
The way
And
it reads, the way it reads now is very unimportant in the scale of history of painting. Back then, it read
unfortunately,
as
yeah.
very important, but now it doesn't because we have different, uh, media to have that discourse. Painting is
Hmm.
something else now, so it can't just be the same idea. You're kind
Hmm.
of history painting. You're not painting history. You're like you're doing a history.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. Yeah, and I've talked to curators of large galleries, and they're like, I like academic painting, but I don't sell that. Like, I'm not looking to curate that because, even though it's very skillful, it's not part of this contemporary conversation.
Right.
It's not really, it doesn't have like a unique voice because while it's a useful skill, you still need to um, like put your own spin on it, I guess. So one guy I saw who, and I'm not going to remember his name, but maybe it's Miles. Ugh, I'm just terrible with names, but his work. He mostly does charcoal drawings or like um he mostly does drawings,
Okay.
graphite, but they're very surreal. And so I think he went through an atelier. um and I think we've all seen that it's like a man embracing a woman, but the man is hollow and he's kind of like he has the woman like within his embrace
It
and
sounds
within
familiar.
his body.
Okay.
Yeah, he's done a lot of like very surrealist work. And um he does oil paintings and stuff too, but he's taking that realism element and kind of turning it on its head. He paints a lot of women, which is interesting, but he actually uses himself as reference.
Oh, interesting. That's kind
So
of
I thought that was really crazy. Like, I would struggle doing that, like because if I was to like manify myself, like I would have a hard time doing that.
hmm
Um, but I think he went through some kind of an atelier process because he kind of shared where he came from, and he was showing like his kid drawings and then his school drawings and how he builds his drawings. And he does very figurative work, but it's very repetitive a lot of times. So
Yeah.
he had like one figure in the center, kind of like on its knees looking up, and then a bunch of almost the same position, but all kind of like in a line going off into infinity. Very skillful, but obviously very symbolic of an attitude, of the spiritual state,
Mhm.
basically. That this idea of like, yeah, being alive in a world that's very depressed, and a lot of his work is very much about like that inner state, which makes it very interesting. And you could do that with poorly drawn work, right?
Yeah.
Like the skill level doesn't need to be there to communicate the idea.
Right.
And I think that that's what's so interesting about some modern work where you're taking the concept is almost greater than the skill that it took to create,
hmm
where it has a very clear message. And I don't even remember how we got on this
Well, that's
or what I was thinking,
that's
but
okay because I can pick up the thread of that a
yeah.
little bit. Yeah, because so I'm not saying that it's like exactly
Hmm.
like surrealists or
Hmm.
for instance, but you know, everyone's favorite surrealist, if you think about that, y- you know, uh, maybe not the layman, but anyone vaguely familiar with art history would be like, oh, Magritte. Like I know Magritte's.
Okay.
Um,
Hmm.
and I mean, I loved Magritte too when I was a kid or just barely an undergrad or whatever.
Hmm.
But when you actually see Magritte's work in person, it's maybe underwhelming
Really?
because
Hey.
it's not that well painted. I mean, it's painted
Mhm.
well enough to
Right.
do the job for what he's trying to do conceptually, but
Right.
it's not atelier level skill going on.
No.
He was
No.
probably formally trained, but he's not
Mhm.
bringing all of that into the painting. He's just like, I just have this really cool idea and I want to
Mhm.
get it down and then move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And so you're right. You don't need to be that skilled to sell the idea. I mean, and then you go to some of the other surrealists like Yves Tanguy. I'm not sure if you know who that is, but
Mhm.
like they just painted these weird, like soft forms that were sort of biomorphic and not at all,
Mhm.
and in these bizarre landscapes that were all
Mhm.
fantastical and like didn't seem to exist in any kind of reality. And
Right.
they were painted very well to the degree with which you thought they existed in that space that the artist had created for it.
Right.
It's also so weirdly childlike and
Hmm.
strange that you were just like, I don't like, you're not impressed by the technique. You're just like, what is this even? And like
Right.
for me, like that's like really the pinnacle of surrealism, where you're just left
Mhm.
with just like a cartoon character with a bunch of question marks over your head. And it's, I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah.
I'm a little uncomfortable. Um, like, but there's a thing where there's like the technique is there, but like the concept has gone through the roof. And so
Yeah.
that's where I'm just kind of like, because my technique and my skill set is very traditional. So I'm
Mhm.
trying to put it in a place where maybe you're not uncomfortable, but you're still left with a lot of questions. It's like,
Mhm.
why would you do that? Like that,
Mhm.
that triptych back there, if it were
Mhm.
full color, like that body of water were like blue and the sky was blue and she was
Mhm.
flesh colored and there was no weird diamond shapes, like that would be a very prosaic woman in
Mhm.
a landscape painting. And
Absolutely.
everyone would be like, oh, that's nice. Like I've seen that before a million
Mhm.
times. That's cool. But you present it like that, and people are like, oh, that's wait, why? Like what does that mean?
Yeah.
And then you just kind of like go off on your own journey with figuring that out. I mean,
Yeah.
I kind of have had, well, not kind of, I did have reasons for doing that, but I'm
Mhm.
not writing it on the little blurb and putting it next to the painting. It's like, this is what it's about, because I don't believe that that's what it needs to be about for the viewer. Uh,
Right.
and so my skill set, when you have that level of skill, that draws people in automatically. Because
Absolutely.
even with laymen or anybody, actually, it's the more educated people that don't give a shit about that. It's like really like the middle person or the layman who's just like, whoa, how'd you do that? That's so
Yeah.
cool. Like that must have taken a long time. It looks like a photo, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
And then you've got like the academic. It's just like, well, skill is overrated and you don't need that to make a picture. In fact, you don't even need to make pictures. You just need concepts. But
Mhm.
both of them can come to my work and just be like, you did this in a way that's very maybe confusing, unexpected.
Mhm.
Like it's an
Mhm.
encounter with work like this that should be prosaic, and suddenly it's not because you've made these moves,
Mhm.
very small moves. And that's,
Mhm.
I think, the key to, like, for my work at least, making it all click. The fewer
Mhm.
moves that I make in order to sort of get the painting to move to a different level,
Mhm.
better the painting is overall. Because then it's not obvious what it is that I'm doing, you know?
Right.
It's just like,
Mhm.
you just kind of go, what is he doing? Like,
Yeah.
and I can be like, I don't know, I did some things, but you tell me. Um, I think that's the great part. So I hook people
Mhm.
with the look of the thing.
Yeah.
Also, the bright colors help, right?
Yeah, totally.
It posterizes it so you can just get it from a distance, in fact, or a tiny
Mhm.
little thumbnail on a phone screen. Um,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
you get into it, and then you really look at it, and you go, "Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening here, but it got me here, and now I'm gonna see what it means
Mhm.
for me."
Yeah.
I think so. It's like a really skilled musician making a pop song. You know,
Mhm.
you hook with the chorus, but then
Yeah.
somewhere in the lyrics there's something like deeply personal and very layered,
Mhm.
very romantic, or
Mhm.
whatever emotion you're trying to connect.
Yeah.
But
I
it's not
know
right
it's
there in the front.
yeah. I know it's interesting. It's interesting you bring that up. I've been like my husband loves this channel, and this guy talks about where these rock stars got their inspiration from, and does like kind of these like mini bios, but based around the song,
Oh,
based around one of their hit songs, right? And I think he was talking about it was he was watching one last night. And it was about Nikki Sixx and how he wrote whatever that hit song was, straight from the heart or attack of the heart or something. I don't know. I always thought it was a dumb song.
well, Kickstart My Heart.
Kickstart My Heart. That's what it was. And it
I've
was
been
this whole
I've
story.
been to a few Motley Crue shows in my day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, look
And
at me. It's not a big guess.
yeah. I mean, apparently they put on a great show. I don't know.
They did.
That's what I've always been told. I was like, why would you want to go to that? And it's like, it's an amazing show. We loved it. I'm like,
Back in the day,
okay.
it was a fun show. It didn't
Yeah.
age well, but
Yeah, I guess not.
I do know
But
the story
I
behind that. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So yeah, the story behind it is he had a horrible heroin addiction, and he died for 2 minutes
Hmm.
and had to have adrenaline like rammed into his heart. And apparently the only reason that the paramedics bothered to save him was that they recognized him. I
Yeah,
thought, well, that's kind of horrible. Like, well, this guy's famous, so let's bring him back to life. The
probably should
rest of
bring
the
him back.
junkies, screw those guys.
I got
Uh,
tickets to the show next year.
oh, do you?
No. Like
Oh,
the
okay. Oh, yeah,
paramedics,
yeah. That's probably what
you
they
think
were
it's not gonna be
thinking.
worth anything if this guy kicks off. So
Yeah, like I'm out like $100 or whatever it was. Man, tickets are crazy now. But yeah, so that he has brought back to life. Like he was blue, like he was gone. And
mhm.
they brought him back with a couple of plungers of adrenaline. And then he goes home. He like leaves the hospital, goes home, does heroin again,
Yeah,
and wakes up. And so like you would think somebody would be done at that point
yeah,
and be like, yeah, no, this is my wake up call. I'm gonna die, again. But no, he just keeps on going on this heroin track and writes Kickstart My Heart. And it's not about like love or lust or any of these things that you would assume but it's about this man's horrible addiction.
yeah,
And I thought, it's really interesting when you dig into why artists make the things that they make. And it's more often that it's more often a problem, right? A
yeah,
painful thing, something they're struggling through that um, it very often doesn't come from a place of good. It's very often something someone is working through,
hmm,
um, and that they need to like struggle through, and make a piece of work about that um, unfortunately
yeah.
is the reason for a lot
Actually,
of art.
that you made me think of something I said much earlier when I was differentiating between illustration and fine art. And
Hmm.
one is that you're making work for somebody else, and
Hmm.
in fine art you're making work for yourself. There's a
Hmm.
different way to phrase that. That's in tandem with what you're just saying now. Is that when you're doing illustration, you're solving somebody else's problem.
Mm, yes.
When you're making art for yourself, you're solving your own problem.
Mm,
So
yeah.
problem is like the open-ended word that
Hmm.
it can be you're trying to resolve something. You're actually using the
Hmm.
art as a form of therapy and you're
Hmm.
putting that into the work. Or it could just be a problem where it's just like, I just have this story I want to tell about this idea I have, and I don't know
Yeah.
how to tell it. So I'm going to try and resolve it pictorially, um,
Hmm.
and do it that way. So problem
Yeah.
can stretch, to the extreme of just like, look at my horrible heroin addict. Maybe you can learn a lesson from this. To just like, I've got all these ideas running around in my head, and I got to get them out, and I don't exactly know how that's going to look, but I'm going to give it a shot and see if I can figure it out in the picture plane.
Hmm.
Solve that problem for myself, which is kind of more of my thing. There's other stuff
Hmm.
embedded in it too, because like I said, I want to layer in my thoughts about art history and my thoughts about like painting 600 years ago versus painting now, and
Yeah.
the screen versus the physical object of the artwork, and
Hmm.
the female figure through a male gaze, and what does that mean? And then what's that conversation about when you make the picture look like this now? Um,
Yeah.
and is that, like you said, with that charcoal artist you mentioned, he's turning himself into the woman and putting himself into
Yeah.
meaning
Into
that
the
way.
work.
Every painter
Hmm.
paints themselves anyway. He's just doing it
Hmm.
really directly. I'm kind of
Hmm.
doing that too, and I'm using the female figure as an avatar. I actually wrote a brand new piece on my website
I
that's
was reading it. Yeah. I was
and
reading it, and I thought it was super interesting, like that male perspective versus that female perspective.
but if you're this is a very prosaic way of saying it, but if you're in touch with that feminine side, or you're not
Mm-hmm.
afraid of that, Jung
Hmm.
used to talk about it as the anima,
Hmm.
like that's who I kind of want speaking for me through my paintings. If I
Right.
used a male figure, it wouldn't be that.
Mm.
It
Hmm.
kind of, for me, it needs to be the female figure. Now it gravitates back to a time where I was looking at, you know, barbarian ladies in like loincloth bikinis with Frank
Yeah.
Frazetta's artwork,
I
and
loved his
like
work.
in like the comic stage of my upbringing.
Yeah.
But I didn't change the figure, I changed the idea. I changed the attitude
Hmm.
behind it. I was just like, this can still represent something, but now
Yeah.
it's something else.
And I
And
think a lot of people I've talked to were very shaped by Frazetta's work
yeah,
because he did something different than a lot of other artists were doing with the female form at the time. And like we see it and we're like, oh man, he's just sexualizing women. I mean, as a woman, especially growing up, being like not your Barbie type body type. When I looked at his women, I was like, oh, I can be beautiful too.
mhm,
Like it wasn't like oh, they're very sexualized. It's they to me looked very empowered and very, like they're hunting the beast,
right,
I loved that.
yeah,
And I know I'm very inspired by his work. One of the first people I talked to, Bryn, she does pinup work, and part of her work was very heavily inspired by that, by his work and by the that illustration era where it was really like, yeah, people would say now from this perspective is sexualized. Was it? I mean, yeah, it
yeah,
was, but I mean, again, we're coming from Motley Crue, like we're coming from, right, like it was also very much part of that time of like, um, but it was revolutionary in that it was giving women power and agency that wasn't there before. Because like Motley Crue, that's the 80s. Before that would have been that hippie era of free love,
mhm,
and which was also very revolutionary. And then, going from these very doe-like illustrations of women in very effeminate roles to being that warrior princess was totally different than what was happening at the time. So
mhm,
it's interesting to contextualize it, because when we're looking back, we're not seeing it from the lens of those people at that time, right? And so yeah, I look at his work and I love it. I love that he was so ballsy, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
He really didn't care. Again, like the audience was dead to him. He really didn't
I think
care.
I think and so much of his work appeared in places that, were marginalized
Hmm.
because they were, like, on pulp magazine
Hmm.
covers, you
He
know
started as a Playboy illustrator.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Actually,
what
my
his.
my it's speaking I gotta go back to my grandfather's thing. He did
Hmm.
give, Frank Frazetta a few jobs in comics too. Comic about he did a comic about, a boy and his horse, or a horse and his boy. I think it's, like, the same title as the C.S. Lewis novel.
Yeah.
But, like, yeah, like, he actually worked for him for a time, so when I started
That's-
buying the Frazetta books, and he's just like, "Oh, I knew that kid." I'm like, he's actually dead now, but, like,
yeah.
okay. But, I think it's an interesting thing because there was a time when it's good to hear that the artist Bryn, like that her pinups, like
Hmm.
she's doing that style, but like gives it more agency because it's a woman artist like doing it, like taking
Hmm.
hold of that and like lifting it to another level where it's not a male gaze that's amplifying it, which could go in wrong directions, as it has throughout
Hmm.
history with the objectification of the female form.
And her work is quite erotic. Like
Yeah,
it's not that it's not. It's just that her work, and I've noticed this with her collector base, is primarily selling to women, which is very
right.
interesting.
Yeah, no, that
Like,
actually doesn't
yeah.
surprise me,
Hmm.
because I think when because women recognize that she's sort of like taken a hold of something that was exclusively in a male domain and made
Hmm.
it accessible to women too,
Hmm.
and ostensibly to everybody. I mean, that is the core tenet of feminism, is that
Hmm.
broader acceptance. But it's interesting to look in history, because male artists have always had the dominance, and you can read your Carol Duncan and Linda Nochlin
Absolutely.
essays about that stuff. I'm not
Hmm.
going to reiterate it here, but if you go
Hmm.
back to like how it shaped the perception of the female figure is an interesting thing, and
Yeah.
like fashion and trends too. So you go back to like Charles Dana Gibson and the Gibson girls, and it always was interesting to me because it's very hard to pinpoint, like, did Charles Dana Gibson influence the Gibson girls fashion thing with the tiny little waist and the piled up hair, and like,
Right.
the poofy shoulders, in like, the petticoats that made the bottom half of the dress like splay out like 6 feet to
Yeah.
the sides. Like, did he draw them that way because he saw that and wanted to
Mm.
amplify it, or did he create that look as an amalgamation of things he's seen, and then it became a look? It became
Mm.
a very chicken and egg kind of
Yeah, it is. And I
situation.
think it's like marketers have found like women are the best consumer base to tap into, right? So if
Mhm.
you can tap into a woman's desire to be attractive and youthful and whatever, you've got it down. And that tiny waist thing, man, that's been a
Yeah,
huge problem for a long time.
it's
You
true.
look back at like Victorian era artwork and they're like
Oh,
this,
yeah, the
you know,
thing was huge. But
is
you can go all the
insane.
way back to Botticelli, and
Mhm.
there's one painting I remember looking at and hearing the stories about it, like, it's most of his women looked like the Venus painting that he did, got the face.
Right.
It kinda had that mannerist sort of thing that, like, a lot of the Sienese painters were doing at the time.
Mhm.
But it's that female figure, she's dressed in this kind of gown, and she's next to, like, a centaur, right?
Mm.
Centaur
Mhm.
looks really sad. I think she's trying to console it or something. But
Mhm.
her dress is like this green, and then there's like this brocade of like vine leaves in relief that are kind of spiraling down it.
Oh.
And turns out that he was doing that on purpose, to with the influence of fashion in mind, because he knew the ladies of the court were going to see that painting, because that's where it was going to be
Mm.
hung. And
Yeah.
like, he was trying to sort of push the fashion thing, because he kind of knew that's what they liked. He's like, I'm going to try and like get them to like the things I do with fashion in my work, so that they start to tell their tailors and dressmakers to make this stuff, and I'll make
Right.
more work based off that, and that'll get me even more famous.
Mhm.
So it was like
Yeah.
such a brilliant thing. You look at
Mhm.
Botticelli and you're just like, this guy was like a fashion magnate, and you're just like, how is that a thing? But he was.
Mhm.
He absolutely.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and I think we move forward back to Frazetta, which is
Mhm.
like the 60s and 70s, pretty much. Um,
Mhm.
the way that he depicted the female figures was very much of an old school art students league George Bridgman kind of thing going on, and like the build of like the bodies that he was using, that
Mhm.
archetype. And then there was like an NC Wyeth kind of thing that he was bringing into as well, which is kind of
Mhm.
few years he would have seen that in some of those Scribner's classics like Treasure Island and Kidnapped and stuff. He would have seen Wyatt's work there and was starting.
Mhm.
He was a young guy at the time and saw
Mhm.
that, and that probably influenced him to sort of start making figures in that way too, but with that,
Absolutely.
his own kind of spin, that fantasy spin on it, because he was
Mhm.
doing these pulp novels like Robert E. Howard's Conan. With that, all that stuff wasn't comics first; it was pulp novels. So he was doing the
Yeah.
covers back then, um, and and I think it created like a new archetype of like the female fantasy figure, and that kind of crossed over into the comic zone, and it
Mhm.
expanded that world out even further.
Mhm.
I mean, if I knew way back then what I know now about how nerds have actually taken over, you know, in terms of like the fantasy, science fiction, fantasy world, I would be blown away by it. I mean, I think it's fantastic, but I
Hmm.
also back then it was still, even in like the 80s when I was a kid, it was still pretty marginalized.
It was absolutely.
And
I know,
now
and
it's like super expansive.
it's insane. I know. I just went to like an anime um fest thing with one of my kids, and I was, I mean, we're in a smaller area, right? It was in Calgary, so very small area, small population for compared to other places in the world, but still, it was like massive event for that area, and very niche. Like it's not like Comic-Con, right? Where it encompasses like every kind of comic book. It was very, very niche and still huge community built around it. And people have traveled from all over, like
Mhm.
it's to meet there. Which is super interesting.
It's such an
How that's evolved.
it's such a community event, those things. I mean, I've
Mhm.
had so many students that are such big fans. I've had a lot of students who are like cosplayers. One student of mine
Mhm.
is like a super famous cosplayer because she makes
Okay.
the most incredible outfits that have lights and wings that work and all this kind of like just
Yeah.
incredible stuff that like again, when I was a kid, I would be like, this is what people are going to do in the future. I'd be like, you're insane. That doesn't make any sense. Why would anyone do that?
Yeah, it's
And
like magic. If you had gotten to see her costume then, like when you were her age, you would have been like
yeah, I
mind
would go
blown. Is this for a movie, you know?
or is it like, is this a real superhero person like that came
Yeah. Right?
from space or something? Like I'd be so confused and like awestruck by that sort of thing. And now it's like this huge community that's like also super tight. I
Mhm,
think that's one of those things, just getting back to our own artwork and like painting, I
mhm,
think a lot of these things, some are more powerful niches than others. Like blue
mhm,
chip art, the fantasy art, comic world, and animation, and painting, and
mhm,
abstract painting, and object making, like ceramics.
mhm,
Like all of those things have positioned themselves kind of apart from one another. I don't know whether it's to say thanks to the internet, because thanks is probably the wrong word, but
mhm.
it's definitely pluralized everything and also set everything apart because everybody
Yeah.
can go find their own niche and just operate within that sphere
Mhm.
itself.
Which is kind of bad for art making, I
Yes,
think.
I do too.
I don't know if you've heard of, I'm sure you've heard of Bob Lazar, but have
Yeah.
you ever heard him talk about how they structured
No.
so he was saying they were all working on the same project, all these departments.
Mhm.
They were all trying to figure out how this craft worked, but they weren't allowed to communicate with one another.
Uh,
So he and this one other guy, they were allowed to talk to each other about how the drive in this spacecraft worked. But they couldn't talk to the people that understood the metal that it was made out of.
oh, wow.
And he was saying, like, how are we ever supposed to figure out how this works if we don't know how this element that it's made out of works?
Mhm.
And I feel like when you're saying that, how everything's so compartmentalized, I feel like that's happened in the art world where we're too isolated from one another and we're not communicating enough because um, if you don't have that cross pollination of different mediums or different, thoughts, you miss out,
Yeah.
and maybe your practice suffers because you don't know about this other thing.
I
um
think I think the community of that particular thing suffers as a consequence too.
mhm,
I mean,
mhm,
we're bringing up stuff like Comic Cons and things like that, but that's
mhm,
been monetized by other sources too. I mean, like the Marvel universe had like, a solid 11-year run of like hit
mhm,
movies. So that
mhm,
allowed that space to be commodified and have a dollar sign attached to it that made it worthwhile for lots of people to participate. So it became
Absolutely.
self-sustaining in that regard, where other art forms, not so much, um,
No.
but there's still community there. And I don't
Mhm.
want to make this sound like I'm putting down working digitally, because like I said, part of my
Mhm.
process is working digitally. I've taught digital painting. Digital
Mhm.
processes are kind of inherent in like building animation and that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. Um, but I do think that the digital space as a forum for artists hasn't really worked out the way that we thought it would, because
Mm.
it's separated people too much. It's gotten very easy to separate things out. It's like, you look at my work and you say, oh, that's like kind of academic work. You could go with like the academic people that are,
Right.
worked in those atelier systems or schooled in those spaces. It's got nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
The only way that I can really like build an audience and appreciation and discourse around the work that I do and people like me is to like actually go find them and go to their
Right.
shows and talk
Mhm.
and see the work, because
Mhm.
do it online and it's just like hello goodbye and like you could forget about it forever. But when you have
Absolutely.
an interaction, especially over the work like in front of you,
Mhm.
then it becomes something else entirely. That's really community building. And that's why I don't
Mhm.
do as much digital art as final art anymore. And I've really committed myself much more to physical work. One, because of the whole AI thing.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the other part is also because I want my work to be seen in physical spaces, like in real life, because
Mhm.
that's what painting is for. It's for that
Exactly.
encounter. Even
Yeah.
works of antiquity, if you're only familiar with it through the screen, you don't
Mhm.
know the scale. You don't know
Mhm.
if there's a texture to it or not. Like
Mhm.
you don't know um like how the the light comes out of the painting
Mhm.
or is really reflected out of the painting versus how it comes through in a screen. Because when you photograph, say like a Rembrandt, like the light that exposes it goes right through the shadows, like right to that base sort of like umber layer, and you see way more of that than you do in person. In person,
Right.
it looks almost black, and so the contrast is completely different. So
Huh.
you haven't ever really encountered the work paintings
Right.
until you actually
Mhm.
see them. I don't know how many studio visits that I've done where a person hasn't said, where people are already familiar with my work from online, and they're just like, this is so much different in person, like
Mm.
every single time, and it's always for a good reason. Because like
Mhm. And you
so
don't know how that piece is
so,
gonna.
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. But I was just gonna say you don't know how that piece is gonna hit you. You
Right.
might have seen it. I've seen some masterworks like 1,000 times digitally or in print even, and then you see it in person, and you're like, oh my gosh,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is not what I thought it was, and it has nothing to do with the physical thing. It's like this metaphysical presence that the work has that moves you, and you don't even know why.
hmm Yeah. I mean, like I was never really super into, let's say, somebody like Rubens. Uh, I was more of a Titian guy, and I always kind of put them on the same sort of level. And I had also seen Titian's work in person in museums, where
Mhm.
for whatever reason I never really encountered a Rubens in the wild. And
Mhm.
I think at the time that I was at the Met, the times that I was at the Met, it was like either in storage or it was like on loan in someplace else. And when I
Right.
finally saw one, because when you look at it in a book or you look at it online or whatever, it's not the actual painting.
No.
It's like, oh, okay, it's like a bunch of like kind of zaftig ladies with lots of drapery and fat babies flying around. Like that's cool, but whatever. And then I finally got a chance to see one. Um, where was it? I think it was the Boston MFA had it on loan from someplace else,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Oh, I get it now. Like I get
Mm.
it now. Like this is incredible. Like
Yeah.
that red fabric that you just think is like just there to sort of cover up the nudity partially and whatever, it stops becoming the object that you thought it was, and it's just this ephemeral red like mist that's just draped across the whole scene, and you're just like, I have no idea how that was done. That's incredible. Like you take it way too much for granted when you don't
Mm,
encounter artwork in the wild. I
absolutely.
guess that's what I'm saying. Like anybody listening out there, like
Hmm.
go to a museum, go to a gallery, keep doing that. That's the kind
Hmm.
of work that you want to make. You have to encounter it yourself in order to really know what that means and then promote that side of it. I think that's also really
Hmm.
important. That's the community thing I was talking about.
Yeah.
That community of like-minded people who also like that stuff, because those people could also be your collectors too. You know,
Hmm.
the people who still like to look at that stuff, not out of a nostalgia, but out of more of like, I've always liked paintings, but I'm not encountering any new paintings that are turning me on in any way. Same thing
Right.
for people with music, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
so you have to sort of like hit the nostalgia button with the physical painting itself,
Hmm.
then it has to say something different too at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I I know for me, because I am in kind of a more rural area, and I've never really been in an area where there's lots of museums. The few times that I have been, definitely spent some time in them, but I would say that was a long time ago.
Mm.
Just getting, y- just even like going to little gallery shows,
Yeah,
um, that are local, like I mean, there's stuff in cafes and whatever, but even a lot of tattoo shops have started putting gallery type stuff in their space,
yeah,
which is really is really interesting. Like that hunger for something real is everywhere, you
yeah,
know? We're and I think this is something that I've seen a lot of in the last few years where people are so done with that noise,
yeah,
with the short the scroll, the short videos, we all do it, right? We all do it. We all have our comfort scroll, um, I'm sure, but it's such an empty experience. I feel like there's a lot of need and a lot of calling back to those older things
hmm,
that connect us to our ancestors, that connect us to great thinkers, right? A lot of the artists that pioneered movements, they were thinkers. They were putting intention and thought and philosophy into their work, and that physical manifestation of their idea was a product of a thought process, not a generation, not just some machine generated prompts.
yeah.
They were part of intention, they were part of experience, they were part of pain, they were part of that human journey, and I mean, I think it's just like a hunger within all of us. It's like that desire to listen to something real, like a real piece of music, or someone even singing imperfectly, but in person. It like resonates through your flesh
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
way that, just hearing a tune on the radio isn't going to do.
I think that you're right. I think in a sense that like we're craving that more now, and I think because we've lived with the noise long enough to know that there has been no return on investment. We've invested
Mm.
time in saturating ourselves with it. We're like, yeah, I'll play. I'll put my time into the infinite scroll. I'll put my time in front of the screen. I'll consume that. And we've lived with it long enough now to be like, you know what? That hasn't done anything. In fact, it's made it worse for me
Yeah.
personally and for the rest of the world. Like
Hmm.
everyone is sad, and I think we all think it sucks. And
Hmm.
now, is this all we've got? No, we've got to
Yeah.
do something else. Maybe the other way, the older way was better, but we can do that, but not repeat it. We can do that
Hmm.
and do it differently. We can
Hmm.
use the old ways of making, just do it a little bit differently.
Hmm.
And I think that during the I was kind of on the latter end of this during my master's program, where irony in art was still like a big thing.
Hmm.
Like on the tail end of like hipsterism and like that kind of stuff, um, where it's like you could only be taken seriously if you were pretending not to be serious.
Right.
And that really didn't get us very far either, because
No.
it the underlying thematic to that is that if you're sincere, you're an idiot. It's like, huh, okay,
Yeah.
well, I have to pretend to not be sincere, and therefore you'll take me more seriously when I
Seriously.
go forward. I can't make an interesting thing because I'm interested in it. I have to make the interesting thing look like I'm disinterested in order for it to be interesting. It was this
Right.
really kind of wrong-headed way of thinking about stuff. But like at like any art movement, like it kind of had to happen. And I
Yeah.
think it's because it started in the art world, it bled down into the media. And
Right.
so that the cynicism, the snarky remark, the snarky presentation of even things like kid shows and stuff like that,
Mm.
we started to see that happening there, where nothing
Right.
was sincere, was everything was just a smart remark and being
Yeah.
clever for the sake of it. And like that, it was like a whole generation raised that way.
Hmm.
We've come to the point where we're like, I think it's the end of that now, because we're tired of it and it hasn't worked for us.
No.
We're just a
Eh,
little bit bitter about all of it. Like I meet so many, I've met so many students over the years, and we'll get to talking about stuff like the music that I've listened to and the concerts I went to in the past. And they're like, "Oh my God, you saw, you know, Primus in their prime, and you saw
mhm.
like Rush and
Mhm.
like all these bands." I saw Bowie when he was still alive. It's just like all this stuff.
Wow.
They're just like, oh my God, like that music was so great. Like, and they
Mhm.
don't really make music like that anymore. And then they would just kind of like pause. And I think there was something I could almost see, like a chiron across their foreheads, just like saying, why is that? Like, why don't
Yeah.
we like they didn't understand how that stopped, or how
Yeah.
it morphed and changed to something like that they weren't interested in anymore. And yet they're growing up in the moment where it's happening. And yet it's not
Mhm.
quite as interesting to them. It is in the moment, but then it doesn't hold their attention. And they'll
Mhm.
go back to like their parents' music and be like,
Yeah.
it holds my attention more. Never really thought to question why it happened that way. And I think,
Mm.
again, it's the way the thing is built. If it's built to last or it's built to be disposable, and we're
Mhm.
pushing more and more towards disposability. And I know,
Mhm.
like
And
Jen,
who benefits from that?
no,
Like
well,
only the companies.
right,
Only
only
companies benefit from that.
capitalism.
Humanity doesn't.
It's a late stage capitalism way of thinking. If we want to
Mhm.
expand it outward into a socio-political commentary. But in
Mhm.
terms of creativity, like it's the artists that have always changed everything. The artists have always been the ones to move
Mhm.
the needle.
Exactly. Yeah.
Going way back to when I was talking about the Hudson River School painters going up to Acadia, well, what
Mhm.
is now Acadia National Park, and it
Mm.
turned into a national park. They really moved the needle on land
Mhm.
preservation, whether
Yeah.
the political angle on it notwithstanding, they did
Mm.
cause that to happen. Um,
Mhm.
you know, design was highly influenced by artists. Like the
Mhm.
Bauhaus movement of design
Yep.
couldn't have happened without the Steel movement.
Mhm.
Like the artists have always moved the needle. So if the rest of us are getting sick and tired of the lack of sincerity of everything and the disposability of everything,
Mhm.
artists have to get back to real making of real things,
Mhm.
and it will move the needle back towards the real. Because right now,
Uh,
all the Gen Zs are just like, oh, it can't be sincere because it's too cringy. And it's just
right.
you have
Mhm.
you have to not think that way anymore, because
Mhm.
it isn't. It isn't.
And at the same time, I think it's like you say, it's like a phase that you have
Yeah.
to go through. And I think that they're just so young. They haven't seen the outworking of those attitudes.
Right.
And one of the things that I'm realizing as we're talking is like you're talking about the artists that move to have land preserved. And I've watched your work, and I would say your writing is very connected to your work. Um and yeah, just that professorship kind of angle that you bring to everything. Your desire to preserve um, that human voice, it's a movement in itself. Like, I think that in a lot of ways, all of us who are dissatisfied with the digital life that we've been given, having having that space to communicate that dissatisfaction, and and you see it in your work is very, very much communicated, just even in how you hearken back to the past, right? It's a way of desiring for thought to be preserved, and that individuality and that human voice, that human experience. If we're not going to get up and say, "Hey, this is wrong," like we need to preserve intellectualism, we need to preserve thought, we need to preserve, you know, these ideas. Otherwise, we're lost.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a whole generation. I don't know if you've ever watched Adventure Time.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Of course.
but that is the world we're building for these children, is a
Mm,
place where they're forever children and they don't know their history,
right.
where it's all been just thrown away
Hmm.
in favor of progress or commercial or whatever it is. Wherever the money is, that's what people invest in. But
Yeah.
if we come up and we're like, I want real things, I want this, I feel like that in itself is probably a movement that is starting to find its people.
I agree. And there, when we talk about movements and you always think about across art history, like the isms, right? So you have like
Hmm.
Cubism and modernism and impressionism, post-impressionism and postmodernism. But now we've kind of entered into this area where sort of everything is kind of included in the media and it's not just artists. And so we're now in like post-digital and
Hmm.
post-truth and like all this stuff
Hmm.
that has more of a sociological angle and a political angle.
Hmm.
And the artists kind of have to take step back away from that a little bit. And a lot of
Hmm.
I know a lot of my master's professors would like excoriate me for that because oh no, the personal is political and art is political. It's just like, yeah, but
Yeah.
we're not going to move the needle if we keep focusing on just like that's the venue in
Hmm.
which we operate and that's the only important art that's getting made and everything else
Hmm.
is just kitsch.
And
Like,
as somebody who's completely outside of the academic world and very much is looking at it from the outside in, um, I feel like when I see political art like that, like what I know what you're talking about, is like it's kind of like watching TV preachers.
yeah, I suppose
That's
that's
kind of,
true. It's,
it's kind of
yeah,
like
some respect. Yeah.
Hallmark movies or like TV preachers or like I don't know. I grew up with like a lot of like Christian media, and
Mm,
some of it was good, and I have like a good experience with it. But a lot of it was like the message was foremost, and the art was somewhere way down here. We don't really care.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And a lot of what I see political work being like now is very much like that. If you didn't like that, why are you doing it?
I know it's a strange thing. I think not to dwell on the political stuff too much, but I remember going into a gallery in Chelsea, and I was actually with a group of, I think it was in my master's program, and we were visiting New York, and
Hmm.
there was an installation piece that was, it looked like what was a protest, and then all of the stuff, the physical stuff that was used for a protest, was like all broken and discarded in the center of the gallery. So it's like protest signs that were marred to the point where you couldn't really read them, burned things, police lines like tying it all together. It's a big mound
Right.
of what's essentially garbage, but like the flotsam and jetsam of like a protest, the physical
Right.
objects. It was a guy and another guy like walking through, and this guy was like very obnoxious because he very loud. It was just like, this is bullshit. I'm in New York.
Yeah.
So I see this
Yeah.
all the time. Hey, what the fuck is this bullshit? Am I supposed to understand this? I don't know what this is. And I was like, okay. And I went over to him and I was just like, well, what do you think it is? He's like, it's fucking garbage, man. And
Yeah.
I was like, yes, it is, but also it's this. And then I explained to him sort of the conceptuality rather than the objectness of it in a way
Hmm.
that he could understand, and how it represented something that went beyond the physical objects of this, like
Yeah.
the palimpsest of protest. I didn't use those words because he had no idea what I would mean.
Yeah.
But, like, I explained to him the concept, and then he was like, kind of walked away. He was like, "Oh, I get it now." But then he did that, and I was just like, you know what? I don't think I did him any favors. He knows what that is now, but I also don't think that he understands, like, that it's just one way of making that kind of work. And maybe it's
Mm.
not the most effective way, because
Hmm.
all it did was just like offend and confuse him at the outset.
Yeah.
So it didn't draw him into the concept. I had to
Yeah.
stand there and explain it to him like a
A professor, and how many people have have that chance,
I just
right?
happened,
Like,
just happened to be there. And I
yeah.
was just like, I was actually kind of flexing a little bit on my colleagues, because it's like, watch
Hmm.
this. I'm gonna put this guy like
In
right
his
in
place.
the zone. Not in his place,
Yeah.
but just like, I'm gonna school this boy and he's gonna know exactly what this is. And they're just like,
Yeah.
no way. And I'm just like, this is how nerdy we are.
Yeah.
So you can lecture somebody into understanding the quickest. Um,
Yeah.
so, but like, even though I did that and it was fun, and I felt
Hmm.
it was kind of valid in the sense that it made him understand the art better and that type of art better.
Hmm.
What he didn't probably get from it was like, there are other ways to do this, and this may
Yeah.
not be the most effective way because of
Hmm.
your reaction. And
And
so,
so it's certainly not an accessible way,
exactly,
right?
exactly,
Like it's not something easy for people to digest, and that's where I feel like unfortunately fine art in the last few generations has really like left people. They don't understand this and they don't want to get a BA in order to do that.
yeah,
Right? And that's where, like, you still see on that kind of layman level, the work that connects with people are landscapes and, like these things that are easy for people to connect with. There or like kids' cartoons again, but they've been primed from the time they were young to
right.
digest them.
And also, kids' cartoons have like a structure to them that it's like,
Hmm.
it is for kids. You can put some
Absolutely.
adult level humor in there too,
Hmm.
that if the adults, mom and dad are watching with the kids, you can
Hmm.
do that, but it's still within this kind of framework.
This
Anyway,
framework.
Looney Tunes framed that a long, long time ago in the
Hmm.
60s, and it really
Hmm.
hasn't changed that much since then. It's gotten maybe
Hmm.
weirder and more whimsical in some ways, but the framework
Hmm.
is there. With
Hmm.
art in the greater art world, there is no framework really. Um,
Yeah.
if you read the tone poem manifesto of Klaus Oldenburg's "I Am Foreign Art," it's basically, I won't quote it to you. It's really long. Um,
Hmm.
but it's basically saying, like, there are no rules.
Hmm.
If you're going to make art, there are no rules, but you have to understand there are no rules, and you're the one who has to make them for
Hmm.
yourself. And that's the only way that the person can understand it. You make the
Hmm.
rules, you make the art, people see the art, then they know the rules, and then they know when you're not even following your own rules, and then that's bad art, right?
Yeah.
But other than that, the gloves are off. You can do whatever. Um,
Hmm.
and it's also not going to be for everybody. It's
No.
going to be for those people who are drawn towards that thing. If I
Mhm.
want to see art that like moves the world in this like kind of aggressive political kind of commentary, then
Mhm.
those are the artists, and that's the work I'm going to look for. And you're going to look
Yeah.
for it at the level where it's sort of codified by like the larger institutions like the Venice Biennale,
Mhm.
and like
Mhm.
some of the blue chip galleries and stuff are going to show
Mhm.
that stuff because they know like that's the stuff that's going to promote the most discourse, and it seems the most correct thing to do at the time, at the same time.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I don't think that, unfortunately, there are no real isms anymore that
Mhm.
really move a whole art
Mhm.
world in one direction or another. It's
Mhm.
gotten, as I've said before, very niche oriented.
It is
So
definitely.
it's kind of what you were saying. I'm
We've
sorry.
come away from, sorry, from like that church that needs to be explained to the layman, where it's very easy to digest to this point where it's like, I don't know what this is. I don't even know how to eat it.
Right. But
Hmm.
I think it's important for artists to understand this world and
Hmm.
how it's divided. So I think I've made a point of trying to understand all the art that's out there, as weird as it is, as it can be,
Hmm.
as maybe as preachy as it can be sometimes,
Hmm.
um, as prosaic as it can be, um, as maybe stuck in the past as it can be sometimes. Understanding that all these things exist and like finding where are you in that?
Mm.
Where am I in that? And
Right.
then you start your own movement, not one where you're like, saying like follow me like a cult leader. No,
Yeah.
the movement is for you, and that movement being, it's kind of touching on what you said earlier, like it's very small, and it may just begin with you. Like you can't save the world.
No.
You're not superheroes, but you can
Hmm.
save yourself. You can save your own art by
Hmm.
not adhering to any other tenet than the ones that you have made for yourself. And like
Hmm.
it's just that path, that core structure of like what you want for yourself and your work. Like that's the movement, like being
Hmm.
sincere with that. I gotta go pretty soon, but I want to leave you with
Yeah.
one interesting thought that is
Yeah.
part of this. So I remember watching a lecture by a writer and critic and theorist, I suppose, named Barry Schwabsky. He's British. He did the foreword for Vitamin P, which is like this very super contemporary book about painting. I think it's in its like fourth iteration or something like that. But he wrote one of the original essays at the beginning of it. Very kind of important piece and an important book in terms of contemporary art world type books. This is something that I did in grad school and the lecture I saw in grad school. And he was talking about a show he co-curated at Whitechapel Gallery in London. Um, and it's funny because he's such a brilliant writer and he was a terrible speaker. Um, just seemed really all over the place. Like one of those people's like, I don't need notes. So here I go. And you're just like, what's happening? And then he ran out of slides. And so he just left it on like this last slide and kept talking for like a half hour. The last slide that he left on, like most of the art was very contemporary and like, difficult to understand, but I was getting it already because I was in a program that helped me to understand it. But the last slide he left it on was very recognizable. It was a very representationally real painting of a window with a curtain, a lace curtain, like blowing inward, right, from the
Mhm.
breeze. It was very pretty. And I was just like,
Yeah.
that's a weird painting to be included in all this. But the
Mm.
artist, whose name I won't put out there, but the artist, and they are very well known in their circles,
Mhm.
had a whole series of these kinds of things. And I was like, that's kind of attractive. And I was like, wait a second. It's like, that looks really familiar. Like, where have I seen that before? And I was like, it's the last painting that Andrew Wyeth did on the Olsen farm, Christina's world, and Christina
Yes.
Olsen. So she died, and her brother Alvaro died, and he did like one or two more things before he just left the property, which is really right next door to where he was living at the time. But that was going to be
Mhm.
sold at auction or something like that. And he did one last painting of a window frame looking out on Muscongas Bay, and the breeze was blowing in, the lace curtains with like little birds on them, almost the same angle. And it was like, to him, I knew it was like evocative of Christina's spirit, just kind of like
Mm.
leaving. And I saw this painting, and it dawned on me, I was like, that's Wind from the Sea. That's why it's Wind
Oh,
from the Sea. Like,
wow.
why? That's And then I walked out of there and I was talking to one of my professors who was one of the guys who was a little less contemporary minded than the rest of them.
Mhm.
I said, his name's Anthony Apesos. He's a very good painter from Boston. And I said,
Mm.
Tony, I was like, that last slide that was sitting up there for last half hour, I was like, isn't that Andrew Wyeth's Wind from the Sea? It looks exactly like that. And he's just like, oh yeah, you're right. You're right. Yep. I was like, how come how come Barry Schwabsky and that curator didn't look at that and say it's completely derivative of what they would feel as a kitschy painting from
Huh.
Wyeth? Wyeth was always kitsch to the uh,
Mhm.
the abstract expressionist, because that's where Wyeth was in his most famous period. was
Right.
that when abstract expressionism was going on.
Right. Yeah.
Strangely enough, he was the most highest American paid painter at the time, but nobody
Wow.
talked about that because
No.
Tony said to me, he's like, I said, why doesn't nobody point out that it looks like an Andrew Wyeth? He's like, because Andrew Wyeth is not part of the discourse, meaning that his work, his entire body of work, doesn't enter into this upper echelon of discussion. So you can have all of these people operating at this like high blue chip academic level
Yeah.
who talk about this work with their own language and their own ways of seeing things, and it's
Hmm.
so myopic that they are
Hmm.
not considering that this looks exactly like that, and you
Yeah.
miss that because you don't let that in.
Mm.
And I have made a point of trying to know all of it because I
Hmm.
realize, like, when you miss stuff like that and somebody points it out to you, you just look like an idiot. Like,
Hmm.
it looks so dumb. And
Yeah.
and in that moment, I was just like, okay, like this sort of like blue chip art thing is just it's just a game. It's just a scam. It's
Yeah.
just a,
It's just bullshit.
yeah, it's like everyone's hitting the next person. They're making a lot of money off of it.
Yeah.
Good for them, but they don't they sound like they know what you're talking about. They want you to think they know exactly what they're talking about, and they don't know
Mhm.
what they're talking about because
That's
they
crazy.
don't
Yeah.
know enough because they've been the next. Oh, and it's funny because it's the next thing that Tony said to me. I said, well, why, like, why don't
Yeah.
they know more so that they know that that looks like a Wyeth?
Hmm.
And he goes, because there are people, academically trained curators, who could walk into a museum and look at a Velázquez and not be moved one bit, does not care. They would just look at anybody from the great periods of art and just not care. They're trained to literally not care about any of that stuff. They know the
Well,
value of it and they know who it is and when it was painted, but they don't
right.
care. And that's really bothersome. So,
It is because that's like turning off art's power,
right.
right? It's
It's
the
through, it's through
it's the
ignorance.
power to move. It is. It's ignorant and it's like emotionally ignorant. Like you're cutting yourself off from a life force in a sense
And it's
because it,
it's a learned ignorance.
hmm.
These are highly trained people, act,
Right.
skilled in writing, skilled in perception, skilled in sort of like philosophizing about academic ideas, bridging ideologies. They can do all of this fancy stuff and all the art forum articles that you could possibly read. I know
Hmm.
some of these people personally, and some
Yeah.
of them are unbelievably brilliant people, like the
Hmm.
smartest people I've ever met. It's
Right.
cool because they're like, some of them are artists. And smartest people I know are artists. Kind of makes
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm.
And I've benefited from being educated by them and being near them. But
Yeah.
there's other people within that milieu that are more famous than them that don't really know anything. They know
Sure.
these very limited things, and it makes them less intelligent as a result.
Right.
And I think, like, well, I always like the adage, like, if you feel like you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Um, I've always
Yeah.
felt like I've always wanted to be in those rooms where I've had to figure out what it is that people are talking about so I can learn
Yeah.
from them. And
Hmm.
I spend a lot of time alone in my studio making this work. So I don't have that opportunity. So
Hmm.
I realized that, like, I just have to just learn more on my own. I just
Right.
learn more. I can't just stop where I am because I've seen where that ignorance gets you.
Right.
It can like just drive you straight into a wall, or that fake tunnel that Wiley Coyote likes to paint. Like,
Yeah.
drive you straight into that
Smack
because you
dab.
believe that it's a real tunnel,
Hmm.
and because you are ignorant of the fact that it was actually paint, you just go splat. It's
Hmm.
the same thing when you're trying to create stuff and you don't know what it is you're doing. You're critically unaware of that thing.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. I would say even just this chat for me, it's like I have so much more to learn, um, because I am just sort of figuring things out, educating myself,
it's
and
lifelong. It never
right.
ends.
Hmm.
Life is
Which
there in front of you to
is
have that.
part of the attraction,
Yeah.
right? It's like I love the fact that I could I can go and learn something completely new tomorrow about art that I would never have known. And that's I find that really exhilarating because I still feel like that kid that's just really curious about all this stuff, you know?
That's the
And
way to be. Like I
I
said
love
earlier,
that sense of wonder. Yeah.
yeah, like that, like I said earlier, that's the thing that you need to tap into, because that's the thing that
Hmm.
Picasso said, that people who aren't artists, that's what they lost, right?
Hmm.
You have to have that there to tap
You have
into.
to chase it,
Yeah.
right? Like it's almost like that. It's almost like you have to chase that thing that drew you in the first place,
Hmm.
but all the time, every day. And in a way, it reminds me of a faith, right? Like there's like almost that metaphysical kind of thing about art where you have to renew that love all the time because being an artist can be very discouraging, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're trying to like live life, raise your family, and do art. It's incredibly hard. And like um and I also just want to say you have been a huge inspiration to me
Oh,
in
well,
in
thanks.
our limited. I know we've had a few chats where and it always seems to be in like my darkest moments when you'll just like pop up into my messages or maybe I'll ask you a question and uh, your experience and your wisdom have really got me through some moments where I was like, I'm gonna give up.
That's really good to hear. I
So,
mean,
yeah.
I love hearing that, and I appreciate that, and thank you for that. But like, it's also like I don't have as many opportunities as I probably should to pay it forward. I mean, I know I tried to do that in my professorship, but that was like a job.
Mhm.
I get paid for it.
Yeah,
And also, I'm kind of boxed in by what that institution wants me to do, too,
right.
like that course. Like, I can't
Hmm.
take that course and be like, yeah, we're not doing this. We're doing this other thing. And my chair would be like, you're fired. So
Oh
I
no.
can't do everything that I want to do.
Yeah.
So the opportunity to pay it forward in the sense that like I'm willing to donate whatever resources I might have to anyone who asks. And so
Right.
you came and asked me, which says to me that you weren't ready to quit, number one,
Yeah,
because
maybe not.
you came to me and you asked me. And
Hmm.
now it's like I recognized that you were in a moment. And I was like, all right,
Hmm.
like don't do that. Like do this. Like this is,
Hmm.
of course you're gonna see it that way. But if you
Hmm.
do this, that'll change. It'll change it. And
Right.
like, so I'm always willing to help anybody who's interested, because if
Hmm.
because you are, but I know your work too. But
Hmm.
if anybody who's interested and is willing to sort of ask, then it means that like I have to step up and do
Hmm.
my part and be like, if I'm believe in my work, I have to believe in these ideas for other people too.
Yeah. Well, I think it's such a powerful thing and not something that you encounter very often in the art world is people who are generous with their knowledge and their time. And yeah, you're definitely that. You've definitely been that to me. And I know I'm not alone either. Like I think I found your work through um Cecilia
Oh yeah.
and yeah, and I think she was a student of yours. Was
Uh
she?
no,
No?
no,
Oh,
no.
okay.
We hit it off for different kinds of reasons, but like
Okay.
the art always becomes like
Hmm.
the entry point and the continuing discourse over time.
Hmm.
So Cecilia and I like to trade ridiculous puns back and forth most of the time, but
That's
uh,
awesome.
but also she's struggling with her art, in the concept of just being an artist. And I always
Hmm.
try to encourage her because I think she's got the skills, she's got the, despite when you see somebody who wants to stop, I can
Hmm.
also see that they don't want to stop. And
No.
so I take the I want to stop part and I'm just like, we're not talking about that. We're going to talk about
Yeah.
the part of you that wants to keep going. And so
Hmm.
like I see that. I saw that in you, I saw it in her. There are students
Hmm.
that I've encountered over the 25 years I've been teaching where you're always going to have that moment happening right in front of you. And like
Hmm.
the the job is the job, but like the real job of like a real artist is to make sure that there are more artists in the world, because
Absolutely.
then I'm not alone, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they're out there, and a lot of times they just don't have a support network
Hmm.
that can hold them up. And that's so important. And I hope that some of these talks are like that for people. I know that they've changed my experience as an artist, just in the last little while that I've been doing them. And I think it was also Morgan Booth. I was telling her that you were coming on, and she was like, "Oh, I love Robert. He always shares I think it was like Tolkien memes or
Oh,
like Lord of the Rings memes." And I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds like something he'd be into."
yeah,
Totally.
that's what she and I do. And Morgan's work is great too. But like, yeah,
Mhm.
but that's the thing. Like, the art becomes the entry point for the discussion, and then you learn
Mhm.
about people. You know, the people that the
Yeah.
artists are, and that's a beautiful
Mhm.
thing. And that's where the community
It's
comes in. And so
mhm.
that's why I'm so happy that you're doing this and happy to have been a part of it.
Yeah, I know. I need to figure out how to like get it out there more so more people can enjoy it. But um
I
I
feel
think
like there's a lot of editing and clipping in your future if that's what you want to do.
I probably, and that's like the one thing I hate
I
and
know
want
it
to avoid all the time.
doesn't sound fun at all, but like
Yeah.
that's the way it has to be distributed in this day and age.
Absolutely, and I have to do that, and I have a lot of work ahead of me. A
All right,
lot of it too
it's a
has
good
been
goal though. You know,
it
I think
is, yeah.
it may seem like this really like um you know super technical, like repetitive process kind of thing,
Mhm.
but because of it is what it is, it's still part
Mhm.
of your art because this is what you wanted to do. You wanted to have this
Mhm.
part, and I guess this is a
Mhm.
fun part, but you have to have
Yeah.
like the work part, I suppose, in there too, in order to make it all kind of work together.
Yes, and so we can proselytize into the internet and share the good news of art and
Absolutely.
how it will keep you young. I love that article. I found that recently. I've read a lot of articles about it being helpful for neuroplasticity, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Just appreciating artwork. Um, and I love the one though where they found that art has almost like a preservative effect on the brain, where
Oh,
it will keep you younger, like biologically younger, than your contemporaries, and that it's akin to physical activity
oh, okay.
how it keeps you younger. So I thought, oh, that's actually really cool because everybody's looking to optimize. Everybody's looking to, which
Yeah,
is such a weird phenomenon that has come about through the internet is like wanting to be like the superhuman.
yeah, but
I don't understand it at all, but
it's true that it's become a weird discourse. Speaking of discourses on the internet
mhm,
now, but if you think about it, the Egyptians wanted to do it too,
yeah,
right? If
hmm,
they packed all their tombs with like cats and food and wine and stuff like that, like they wanted to live forever too. This has been going on
absolutely,
for a long time.
yes, it's
Anybody who
true.
knows
I don't.
their Tolkien also
Hmm.
knows that there was a time, if you read the Silmarillion, that
Which is the best one.
the race of men in that wanted to live forever, and it became a big problem. Um, so no spoilers. I'm
Yeah.
not going to go on about it because I
Yeah.
could, but like the idea of like the longevity thing has
Mhm.
been with us like since we realized our mortality is scary. Um,
Mhm.
so now we just have a different conduit that we can do. It's like, oh, let's like fuse this with like the wellness world, and we'll talk
Mhm.
about blue zones and like health optimization. It's just like,
Yeah.
all right, you can dress it up with whatever language you want, but it's
Mhm.
still like being entombed with your cat, essentially. Like you still need to do the same kind of
I
thing.
know a lot of people who would dig that, who would be into that, who'd be like, "Yes, fluffy me forever. We must be buried together."
So,
Yeah, and
but
yeah,
I agree. Like I think anything that engages you at a level where it's like there's a lot of thinking a lot of process, but also a lot of joy that comes out
Mm,
all at the same
mhm.
time. Of course, it's going to increase your life because
Yeah.
you feel alive in those
Mhm,
moments. You can break
mhm.
it down to like the serotonin and neuroplasticity and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yep.
But really, it's just like I feel a lot better about me and things when I'm doing the thing that I like to do.
Yep.
Like,
And even just appreciate the thing,
yeah.
even just go and enjoy art. Like even if you're not an artist, that
Oh,
alone
yeah.
is like such a um I know we like to break things down into like that scientific, this is what it is, or even like an academic because it's a way to understand the thing. But what I found with artwork that that for me is a lot easier or more accessible is like that feeling that you get when you look at it
Hmm.
is something that brings me beyond my current everyday problem. It like takes me outside of myself. And I can't remember who it was, but was talking about how this guy was talking about how he went to a museum and there's all these people standing in front of this classic painting, and some of them are just weeping, and some of them are just like transfixed by it.
Hmm.
And if you ask them why, like they couldn't tell you,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
but there's something more there.
It reaches like beyond. I mean,
Hmm.
maybe you were, I don't know if you were reading it and it was about the Rothko Chapel in Texas, where there's a bunch of Mark Rothko set up as if it were a church, but it's not.
Mm.
It's
Right.
just this chapel like setting where
Mm.
they are, and
Hmm.
there's pews, and you can sit, and people
Okay.
go there, and they're just so incredibly moved. And like, I don't think that many of them know modern art. I don't think they
No.
understand like the minimalism of Rothko's work or what it meant to him when it was painted. And it's certainly non-representational. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
just like a real, fancy color field type painting in its presentation, and that's kind of it. Like in terms of like what the object looks like, but there's
Yeah.
something that transcends that and reaches out and touches people, because there are
Hmm.
people who sit there and cry in front of a Rothko and they don't know why. And it,
Hmm.
a non-artist would be like, but it doesn't look like anything. Why?
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's because that's what art does. And
Hmm.
that's all you can say.
Yeah.
It's
Even if you get really close to a figurative painting, it doesn't look like anything.
right. Right. Well,
Yeah.
all abstraction is based off of representation anyway. Um,
Hmm.
and also is, Gerhard Richter, when he made all of his like blurry photograph paintings, people
Hmm.
were like, why are you making your paintings blurry? And his argument was always, paint can't be blurry. It's just
Yeah.
what it is on the surface. It's just like you think you're seeing
Mhm.
a blurry image, but a photograph is blurry because there's a technical problem. But the
Yeah.
painter made it that way, so it's not actually the problem.
Hmm. Yeah. It's interesting. It's like that perception versus reality, right?
Hmm.
We perceive things that they're not. It's not what it seems.
Right. And
Hmm.
so paint can do kind of anything. I think that's
Hmm.
why it's still here.
Yeah.
It's the tradition in which you and I both paint, this sort of figurative realism kind of tradition that sort of comes from like a school of thought that's like over 600 years old. And you have to
Yeah.
ask yourself, with all the crap that we've got now to distract us, why
Hmm.
is it still around? Why are we still
Hmm.
doing it? Why are other people still doing it? Gotta
Why do
be
people see it and they're like, wow,
yeah,
what is this?
yeah.
And like me, I didn't, why I didn't go to school or anything, but I, in a way, have devoted my life to this mode of communication. And same with you. Like, it's not just, and we talk about being a living artist and like how many hours we put into it and how hard it is to practically do and everything, but what is that motivation, that inner motivation that makes you devote your life, and not just your life but like your family's life in
Mm,
a sense, because it takes up so much of your existence and is part of your home and a part of like your mind. You're present at home, but you're thinking about that painting.
yeah,
Like it's an obsessive sort of mission that you feel internally, um, that uh, you in a way you devote your life to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Why is that?
Well, yeah, I know. It's just that's the thing. You take that, you make that choice, and the way that you get longevity out of it is that you stick to it.
Mm.
Again, that's a very Captain Obvious thing to kind of say.
Yeah.
Like, well, if you
Oh,
stay with a thing a long time, then that's the thing that you do. But
right.
that's really easy to say
Hmm.
and much more
And I
difficult.
think it's a lot easier to say if you're making money at it. Like
Oh,
say
sure.
you were that Nikki Six, it's obvious why he would want to be a rock star,
Right. But it's not
right? Or
obvious
even
why he would do so much
Michelangelo.
work that would kill him.
Right. Yeah. But I
But
mean, even successful artists like Michelangelo and whatever, they had a monetary reason for it. When you don't, what is that? Why? Why is it must be something deeper than just edifying your physical reality.
yeah, I think if you, well, if we want to stay with the Motley Crue paradigm, if we look at them like before they got famous,
Hmm.
like they were just doing this weird sort of like glam punk, LA scene kind of thing where
Hmm.
I'm sure some people were just like, what are you guys
What
doing?
even is this?
And they're
Yeah.
just like, no, this is cool.
Hmm.
If we keep doing this, everyone will think it's cool. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there were a bunch of people who were like, yeah, good luck with that.
Hmm.
But like they were right.
Yep.
They didn't know they were going to be right. They were just a bunch of stupid
Hmm.
kids, but
Yeah.
they believed in it and they made it happen. And I think
Hmm.
that that's the going back to the kid thing, the little kid thing.
Yeah.
That's when you really believed. Like,
Mm.
can you still do that? Can you operate on that principle for an entire human lifetime?
Mm.
Like, that's what any artist strives to do. And
Yeah.
you can get sidetracked by the money. You can get sidetracked by being famous and showing in this gallery or doing whatever. Um, but those are all sidetracks anyway. That actually takes you away from the original thing. So, as much
Hmm.
money as you can get from this career or not, it's very much besides the point. And it
Hmm.
sounds very not pragmatic and just like that doesn't work in a modern world. Well, I just told you it was a 600-year-old tradition. So
Yeah.
what's modern about that? We're doing
Yeah.
something that kind of transcends that idea.
Hmm.
I think that's the hardest thing to sort of stick with, but I also think it's the
Absolutely.
thing that you have to stick with.
Hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I, That's that's just a cool place to leave it if because I know I'm sure that everyone has to go to the bathroom for 3 hours. But yeah,
My
I think
dog
that
wants to go
sticking with
inside.
it thing, yeah, that sticking with it thing is hard. And I think that, just having someone who's been in it that long saying, yes, stick with it, this is worth it. I hope that that really encourages people
I hope
to
so
keep
too.
making work. Yeah, because it is really important. I purposefully don't show uh flashes of images on the screen of Robert's work because I really want people to go and check out your work, and engage with you on all the social medias that we just bashed. um, you can find Robert's work. I have a link in the description, but it's Robert Sullivan Art on Instagram, and I believe it's robertsullivanart.com.
That's right.
Yep. Okay. And yeah.
You can find my writings on my website and such too, if that's what you're into.
Hmm. Yeah, and get more of where he's coming from. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your thoughts. And um, you always give me like names of people that I haven't heard of before that I'm like, okay, I need to go and research this because it's just, yeah, it's such a big world. And I always come away from any conversation we've had feeling like, wow, I have really learned something new, so that's super cool.
Well, like I'm happy to do it. It's a privilege to speak to you here, but it's also a privilege to motivate you to not just continue to do your work, but to like
Hmm.
find new things because
Hmm.
I am older, so I've encountered more things, and I just want to pass that along and hope
Yeah.
everyone's kind of bringing up the rear with like accumulating even more new stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just so glad we got to connect and um yeah, and pet your dog for me.
I
So
will.
yeah.
Thanks, Ariana.
All right, thanks for coming on.
Bye now.
And we'll see you later.
Okay,
Bye.
got it.